welcome to the 4Corners podcast. I'm Brad, and I'm here with Matt and Shad. Gentlemen, how are you doing tonight?
Good.
I'm doing well myself.
I'm gonna do the Larry Zabisco thing every time.
I'm just grumpy you beat me to it.
I'm gonna steal that, and make it our own.
Make it your personal thing. Yeah.
So we were a little negative last week, talking about wrestlers that ruined their legacy. So we were kind of doing the counterbalance tonight. We were doing wrestlers that salvaged their legacy. And I think there's going to be a couple of names that are going to kind of jump immediately to people's minds. I think, namely, the top one that I would say is Jake Roberts.
Jake is really he's honestly a great story because there's so many pieces and layers to it. And the fact that Jake went from being, I think it might be fair to call Jake one of the biggest burnouts in the modern era of wrestling, to being able to recover and have a life where he is and remarry his ex-wife, even like all of that stuff is just huge.
Is he with Cheryl Roberts again?
Yeah, they got remarried.
Oh wow, that's something. I didn't know that detail.
Yeah, going from the guy probably that was going to be remembered for the Beyond the Mat documentary to making the con circuit. I think he even got on Joe Rogan. And
he did. It's probably been a few years since he did the Joe Rogan podcast, but
yeah, I think he did it around COVID.
Yeah, I remember that when he did it, like I remember it being like well received. People were entertained by it, even though it wasn't like he was neither burying people or it wasn't like a some sort of wrestle shoot, but he was apparently entertaining and came off very well.
And he seems to have a good reputation on the con circuit, I would say.
He doesn't ever. Go ahead, Matt. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry to cut you off, Shad. Like I haven't heard anything specific. Maybe Shad, like you've heard more, you've seen him recently, but I've kind of like through the grapevine heard that he's certainly not having issues, with sobriety and things that potentially you would run into when you're doing like circuits around the country. But I haven't heard like good things. I know our buddy Tim has seen him not that long ago. He went to a convention that was there, and Jake seemed like he was in good form. He was a little, I guess because he's had health issues, like real, like beyond the substance abuse, like
bad shape.
Yeah, so I think when Tim saw him, which was a little while back, I think Jake's better now, but Tim, I didn't kind of indicate like the longer the session went on, like he seemed like a little more like in pain, which
I've heard
it happens.
I've heard the worst thing I've heard about him on the con circuit is he can come off a little grumpy, but it's not like it doesn't impact your interaction with him. He can just seem a little meh.
I did see him at a convention not long ago, and I didn't bug him because at the time, poor dude just looked worn out. He had the cannula in, like he's got emphysema or something, right? Or
COPD.
Yeah, something like that. And so he had like cannula in and that sort of thing. And he was just kind of sitting at his table, kind of looking a little down and messing with his phone. And I was like, you know what? I'm just not gonna. And I talked to Sarge and that sort of stuff. But I saw Jake and like he wasn't mad, and people did go up and see him. He's interacting with him and talking and that sort of stuff. But he just looked tired, and I was like, man, I would feel bad bugging. So, I have never heard anything bad about Jake's current convention circuit stuff. There are some people that do it and you can tell they don't want to be there and they're not interested and they're just doing it for the paycheck, and it shows.
Mm-hmm.
But even, Jake was just kind of, no, he was fine. I mean, he was fine. I haven't heard a thing, didn't see anything like that. So
He's
And what
very
Yeah.
he's very. So I met him randomly. I didn't even know he was gonna be there. It was an anime convention, and this was earlier though. This was like 2018 or 2017 with him. So it was like he was like new to being on the con scene, and like I think sobriety was still a little newer, and he was like super happy to be there, like wanting to talk to you and stuff. And yeah, but like I had a good interaction with him. I don't think I've ever had a bad interaction with anyone. I'll tell you who I will
I
tell
had one.
I will tell you who is a patron saint and puts up with way more crap than he needs to. Listening to idiots chirp at him is Mick Foley.
Yeah.
That man is a saint, and I don't know how he does it.
I remember his first book has the line, "I don't think I'd ever want to meet somebody that said that Bad Blood Hell in the Cell was their favorite match," and yet he had to hear that from one of the. I was at a convention. He had to hear that from one of the guys running the panel, and he just kind of smiles and nods, and I'm sitting in the back going, "Oh God, don't no."
So when I met him at his one man show, and the guy in front of me was just going on about all this dumb crap and doing all this like uber internet smarky stuff, saying all this insider lingo, and it just goes on and on. He's being nice about it. Oops. And then I walk up, and he and I just have that eye contact of well, that was a thing.
Yeah, you kind of go.
It was just kind of like just that awkward, like well, I don't want to bother you since that person just like was a total weirdo.
Yeah.
But I have to find my picture.
go ahead.
Of him.
I met him at WrestleCon at WrestleMania, I think 2018. Because I think that was the one that was in New Orleans, right? The last one they did in New Orleans.
I think so.
Because I think 2019 was New York, because then COVID happened. But
I think it was 2018 because this podcast started right after that ROH one. Because I remember talking about I don't remember her name, the Kelly Klein and what's her name? The woman that won the ROH women's title for the first time, Sumi Siaki.
Oh yeah.
I remember we talked about the botch in the end of that match because she like legit knocked her out.
Did we? I had to go way back, and that may have been like this show before it was like 4Corners. It was like a different.
No, it was
entity.
it was like maybe like the second. It was maybe it might have been on like one of those first 2 of 3 episodes that we lost when we were still learning.
Yeah, so I actually I had to go way back, but I went to that show. I went to that Ring of Honor show with Christopher, friend of the show, Christy Petrello. Yeah, and that was a show. I actually liked that show, but that was a show that was like hours long. It was like a 4-hour long show, and it was out in like Lakefront Arena, which is not near anything with like New Orleans. So it was we luckily got like we randomly were able to get and hop in like an Uber SUV and get out of there. But there was like literally dozens or hundreds of people that were just stranded there waiting on Ubers that were going to take like an hour to get there.
I was going to say, didn't they end it like after like bus servicing and like standard like public transportation ended and like all these people were out there till like
it was
4
late. It was late. And again, Lakefront Arena is not like near anything. Not really. So it was like a mess. And it's like, why did I have to wait like 20? Why'd you do like a 20-minute match with like Marty Scurll? Like I didn't want that. Like
was that Dalton Castle and Marty Scurll, and they did that after Cody and Kenny Omega for some reason, and no one cared.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was. I'd have to rewatch it, but I think for the time it was like fine.
It was like when they it's like when they didn't put Hogan and Rock on last because Triple H had to go on last and no one cared because they'd already done like the climax.
But to cycle it all back, I met Mick Foley at like that convention, and I wasn't even there getting anything for me. I was like getting something for a friend, and I did that thing where it's like just not to confuse people, especially Mick, who unfortunately has had head injuries and concussions and things like that. But I I just said like I was getting something signed, so I just said like my name is the name of the guy thing he's signing. It's like, oh, my name's Mike. Like, yeah, he's like, Mike, good to see you. And I was like, he was really nice, he was really friendly, really like socially gregarious. Just it was a good experience. I guess I was also kind of, I don't know why I was this way. Maybe because like back in the day, like WWE jaded me, but I actually, for some reason, had no idea how big Mick Foley was. He's like a big dude. He's like,
Mm-hmm.
when I met him, he's probably like 6'4", 6'5",
He's 6'3".
and
Yeah.
He and I are
okay,
the same height.
he seemed a little bigger, but maybe.
Well, I think,
And I mean, I'm not
I think you have to
decent
also,
size.
you have to realize too that for a vast majority, like from his WWE run on, like he could not stand straight anymore.
Yeah, he hunched over a lot.
Yeah.
So the last time I met him was also at a convention, and so I went to the Q&A because it was the 20th anniversary of the ear incident, and it was Mick and Vader doing a panel together, which was really cool. And I had the infamous ear picture that Mick and Vader both signed. But as we're leaving, we're heading out the door, and I'm walking out the crowd line, and he walks out the guest line, and I turn and look, and he's walking upright, just chugging along, and he and I kind of turn and look, and he looks at me, and we're like eye to eye with each other, and I'm like, okay, interesting. But when I met him, he was super nice, super easy to talk to. I said, I don't take up time. I appreciate, all your hard work. Used to be an indie guy, so there's whole levels to it that you did that I really appreciated. And then I cracked him up at the end because we do all that, and I say, "Sir, I thank you for being here. I hope this is a good event for you." He goes, "You know what? I appreciate that. Thank you." I said, "And have a nice day." And I walked away, and I looked back over my shoulder, and he looks at me and went, "Oh, damn it," because I hit him with his own line, and he didn't catch it for like 3 seconds. So, but yeah, super nice guy. The only bad interaction I had with anybody was when I met Ted DiBiase, actually. Like
That's kind of sad.
Yeah, it really disappointed me.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really disappointed me because I went talk to him a little bit. He didn't have anybody's table. I'm trying to talk to him a little bit, and he's just kind of totally blowing me off. I walked away. I got a picture autographed, and I was really disappointed in that interaction because I was just like, I was a fan of his work. I liked what he did. I was hoping to banter with him a little bit, and he was like, "Yeah, okay, here you go." And I was like, "Huh." I said, "Do you bundle the picture and the autograph together?" He goes, "No, that's extra." And I was just like, "Well, I really appreciate your pre-WWE stuff. I thought that was really good work." And he's just like, "Okay." And I was like, "All right, fine." And he just kind of walked away. I was like, so I don't know. He might have just been having a bad day or what, but that was the only bad interaction I've had.
That's really disappointing because, I mean, especially you're obviously, if you're in like his position, you're obviously best known for your WWF stuff. Not even like the stuff you did with WCW, because then you're like your in ring had kind of done. But if a dude came up to me, he's like, "Yeah, I loved your like Mid South stuff," or "I loved like the run, the brief run you did, like in early '90s All Japan or something like that," I would be like, "Oh, okay," like because it's like a real fan. They know they want my early albums or my later my avant-garde, my experimental albums. They don't just want me to. Yeah, I'd love
That's a really good way of putting
album. Yeah, it's like I'd be like, "Oh, okay, like that's interesting." Like,
and it's like, oh, I don't have to talk about
yeah.
the same 5 things for a couple of minutes.
Yeah.
Sometimes
Sure,
though,
let's talk about working with Zeus.
yeah.
Late night.
Let's
late
talk about
80s.
the Andre angle again.
Now,
Yeah.
I will say that obviously that was a bad experience, but I've met some people, sports people and stuff. Like sometimes they're not talkative, but they're not mean about it. Like if you answer, they'll just be like, they'll be nice about it. They'll be like, "Oh, how you doing? I'm doing good. Like, I like this. Oh, thank you. That's very nice." and stuff.
Yeah, there are some. I have had Captain Pike. Um, is it Brave New Worlds? I think that's the Star Trek he was on.
Oh, the
In
new
any
one.
event,
Yeah, I think it's
yeah.
Brave New World.
So we decided to do something as a joke, and we all pulled out our Starfleet stuff and got a picture with him, and one of them's holding a sign that says "Don't tell Temporal Investigations" from that DS9 episode, and we thought it was funny. But we get done with that, and he goes, "Yeah, guys, have a nice day." And he kind of gave us that side eye, like that was weird, but it was a neutral thing, and the picture's still funny. But you know,
As long as
what are you gonna do?
they're willing to roll with the
Yeah.
joke.
But now Jake seems to be doing fine. Hacksaw is not quite as boisterous as he used to be.
No, he was when I
But
met him, but he was a young pup when I met him.
Everything he's been through, I understand he's a little more low key.
I will say I've met quite a few wrestlers, and the only one I would ever compare to I would call him an ape is Hacksaw Jim Duggan. Like he you shake his hand and his hand is huge. It's like, wow, you're just like he's not super tall, but like he's built. Even like older, it's like, wow, you're just kind of a monster, aren't you?
Well,
he had
oh, go ahead, Chad.
he had the biggest hands of anybody I've met, except for Greg Valentine. Hacksaw Duggan and Greg Valentine have, and I know it's the cliche, but when they open they have big like baseball mitt, and they're not just like long, they're like thick, meaty. And I'm just like, I went to shake Greg Valentine's hand. I'm not a small dude, and I got like my fingers to here around his hand to shake his hand. I was just like, damn. Like, no wonder.
What was meeting Valentine like?
He was just so low key. I just went over. I said, "Sir, I appreciate you. I appreciate your work. I and some of that sort of stuff." And I shook his hand. I said, "I hope you have a good day." He's like, "That's cool, brother. Have a good one." And because there are a lot of times when I just don't have the budget to go get like pictures or autographs with everybody, but I'll go talk to him and tell him I appreciate the work and shake hands and that sort of stuff. And Valentine's was a neutral kind of.
He is one of my favorite vet stories, though, because there's the Uncharted Territory podcast. They work with like an Iowa-based promotion, and he came in for a show, and he was gonna beat the local guy, and they were talking about when they were planning it, and Valentine's like, "Well, I'm gonna beat you, but what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna let you get out of the figure four, and then I'll just beat you with the elbow." And I always thought that was a cool like give and take situation.
Yeah. Give him something in the course of it, sure.
Yeah. Okay, so do you guys want to do you guys want the other big one, or do we want to go a little smaller? Let's go. I'm gonna go a little off script here for my list.
Okay.
We're gonna go Sean Waltman.
Okay, that's a pretty good
Now,
one.
I will say where Sean Waltman I think is rehabbed a lot is, well, he seems to be clean now, which helps him a lot. But like of the DX guys, and I think where he really stands out is he just seems like such a humble and appreciative guy. Like when they did that stuff with FTR, I think DX did. I think Dax said like Waltman was the only guy that like came up and like thanked them and like was super appreciative about everything.
Yeah, he didn't seem like he joined it, because the story, for those who aren't aware, is that basically Dax said that that the Clique, which including like Michaels, but not Dax was legitimately quite offended by their actions, but Sean Waltman apparently like was not that way and did come up to them, and I don't quite recall the story if he was apologetic, but he certainly was like very appreciative of them and was considerate and kind to them. It was like, like, I love your guys' work and everything. And that is kind of like the stories I've heard of things I've seen online, which obviously none of us here know him personally, so you kind of just had to hear like through the grapevine, or you see the way he's interacting with people online, or people sharing stories about him. But that does seem to have been the case, like in recent years, like when he cleaned himself up, he does seem to have like really rehabbed his reputation, where he did seem like maybe his past negative behaviors were due a lot in part to perhaps some immaturity, like emotional immaturity, and the substance abuse. And when he cleaned himself up, he seems to really have taken a step back and had like some introspection about that behavior.
Yeah.
And he seems to have improved from all the things that I've heard. So, and I hope that's the case. Like I'm going to take it at face value because I have not heard anything to contrary.
The stories that I've heard from people who've interacted with him are a lot like that. Gracious, humble, really helpful. Waltman seems, from what I've been able to see, Waltman seems to have kind of become a very good model of like an elder statesman veteran.
I would
wrestling.
say I would say the three paragons of like the quintessential veteran and how you should behave are Waltman, Billy Gunn, and Gangrel.
Just showed up on the Double or Nothing AEW 2024 pay-per-view.
But like he did
really cool.
did stuff when Orange Cassidy was like still more of a comedy character, and they did this whole thing where the orange juice got in his blood. And someone interviewed him about it, and he was just like, well, like, I watched his stuff, and I was like, well, I have to make it work, so I'm just going to roll with whatever he wants to do. And he just seems like a chill dude.
Yeah, Gangrel. There's two things I kind of recently learned about Gangrel, which like I find so amusing, and I'm glad that he did show up at Double or Nothing. Like I don't know that they'll do anything more with him.
That's his second AEW appearance.
It is like he did it a little like a year or so ago.
No, he did. It was back. 2 years ago. He was he was in the Broken Universe, the Matt Hardy thing, because he was holding Shane Helms hostage, wasn't he?
Yeah, something like that. But he does seem chill, and I have actually heard good things about him. This isn't like he's redeemed himself. It's just like I've heard people say like he's
he's just a guy that gets it. And
yeah, he's very considerate. He's like funny. He's like personable.
He's kind of, I don't know if I could hang out with him though. If you see him in interviews, he's like mega extrovert, and sometimes like, dude, you need to dial it down a little bit, because he just
is he like high energy?
Oh, he's like very very high energy. If you watch interviews with him,
so there's two things that I've learned about him that I find like fascinating and highly amusing. One was I don't really know a lot of the backstory, but I guess he used to run a wrestling school, and there's like apparently there's stories there, and not ugly stories, not him abusing things or anything like that, but just things that it's like. It just seems like maybe he was mismanaging this, or he goes maybe poor choices, but in a funny way. Because someone was basically saying like, I remember I think this person had either trained at the school or was aware of things, but he was like, yeah, Gangrel on his wrestling school had a sign that said we're always open, and so like I guess some guy was like just started calling him up at like 11 p.m. at night. And Gangrel will get like so pissed off. He's like, "Why are you calling me? It's 11 p.m. at night." And it's like, "Well, you're always open. You say you have a sign that says you're out."
It's like, you're a vampire. So just, like, this should be your prime hours.
Yeah, it's just like ribbing him, and he would apparently get like so worked up and angry. And it's like, I think if that was a rib, that to me, that's the kind of rib I like. Fuji, the old example we always use, the Mr. Fuji, like, I killed your dog and made you eat him. Ha ha ha! It's like Jesus. That's
little
my
much
Fuji impression for those who don't know. And the other thing about Gangrel that I recently learned about, and I actually sent this to friends of the show, Christy Petrillo and Damien, and I'm like, this is absolutely amazing. I need to know more about this. But Gangrel actually does like, I don't know if it is a podcast or like a YouTube thing or something, but he apparently has like some sort of show where he periodically rates and reviews like hip hop albums and rap, and it's like, what?
That's such a weird...
the vampire kid, the vampire guy, like the old vampire guy, cosplaying as like Vampire the Masquerade. Like he does like a whole rap like podcast.
They got WWE in legal trouble with White Wolf.
Oh yeah,
yeah. They had to get that name sorted out and get an allowance.
Yeah. Now
I would.
Oh, it's good.
Probably. You had your top three there. You said it was Waltman, Gangrel, and who was the other one?
Billy Gunn.
I would probably swap Gangrel out. This is such a mark answer for me to say, but for elder statesmen of wrestling stuff, I'd probably swap Gangrel out for Sting. But to say
true.
that Waltman is in the same echelon as someone like Sting is on this sort of thing, I think is really high praise.
Where I would
Waltman doesn't have an ego that he has to keep feeding for him to be put over younger people or anything. He talks to him. He wants him to get better, and he, from what I've seen, I don't follow him, but on social media accounts, he seems very complimentary to what he sees today.
And he also laughed. He had a good sense of humor about it because he worked Chikara, and they put him on commentary for a couple matches, and they had this character called Prakesh Sabar that was like from behind the Iron Curtain, and all he had to watch growing up were Sean Waltman compilations. So he pretty much just aped his act entirely, and he had like this mask with like this tongue sticking out, and they put Waltman on commentary. He's just quiet, and the play-by-play guy's like, "You okay?" And he's like, "Oh," he's like, "I'm sorry. Like I've just never watched someone do my act. Like I've never seen my act from this angle before." And there's a picture.
I haven't heard that. He should. After that, if I was him, I would have just leaned into it and just for the sake of comedy, just been like a complete homer for that character. He should have just been like, oh, like the guy should have just done like something like he did like an arm drag or something. He was like, amazing, the best arm drag I've ever seen.
Yeah.
just
the guy doing like a cosplay of him. Yeah, he
very quiet, understated compliments.
Yes.
Like he goes in for that Bronco Buster. He flies in for that Bronco Buster, and you hear Waltman go,
"Yeah, perfect."
Yes. Okay, so.
But that's good. I'm glad. I appreciate that he's a guy who like he and what kind of goes with your what you said a minute ago. It's like a vet who gets it. It's like he's not. It's not about his ego. He's not putting on airs about things. He's just like he realizes like it's. I would feel that would be complimentary too. It's also guys coming up to me for advice or guys like learning from stuff that I've done or my contemporaries. I would be like, yeah, like that's amazing. Like because that's how the business continues to evolve and grow is like people build on it. That's why I kind of it's like a sidebar, not trying to get on a tangent, but that's kind of some people, some vets especially like who get bitter, or even people who are wrestling personalities like Cornette or whatever, who it's like so and stuff. And I have criticisms of some people in the modern era. Like I've been critical of people like Will Ospreay. Although I my opinion on him is evolving because I feel some of the things that annoy me about him.
Some of the stuff he did in the lead up to this pay-per-view, I was like, oh, I didn't know that guy had it in him.
He's actually surprised me, but it's hard to cut you off. Let me finish my thought real quickly. He's I feel actually like improved some of the things that annoy me about him. Not like he's not. Haven't gone 180 completely on Will Ospreay, but I do think he's in the process of improving. But guys like Cornette or something who hates on just modern stuff or the Bucks or like that. It's like, oh, it's not what I'm used to. It's like, yeah, but that's not a bad thing. Like it evolves, and sometimes maybe it evolves in ways that annoy you. Like again, I'm using Will Ospreay as a reference point to like there are things that he does or has done that I haven't liked.
Yeah,
but it's the entire thing of everything evolving and improving. Like it's actually a good thing. It may not exactly be what you're used to, what you prefer, but it's still. For the business to survive, it has to change and has to be a different way. So
yeah,
okay. I realized that I'm apparently insufferable. I watched the Roderick Strong Will Ospreay match from Double or Nothing, and I'm watching it. Like I have actually gotten to like Ospreay out of the ring a lot more than I did. Like. From the interviews he's done and stuff like that, it's like, you know what? Sure, he might be a little strange, or he might seem a little strange to me because I'm not English and haven't worked in Japan. But he seems like a straight up dude. He really wants to do well. He, that sort of thing. But then I was watching the match with Strong, and I'm like, he did this sequence where he's like, oh, selling the leg. And then he backflips out of a back suplex, runs, springboards off the rope, does a cutter, goes for the pinfall, Strong kicks out, and then he rolls over and grabs his leg. And I caught myself in the middle of doing it, literally rolling my eyes. And I'm like, I'm that guy.
You know what I respect? You know what I respect about him is especially since Mania, but he had it beforehand, is like he's taken the shit like Triple H said about him, and like I think the way WWE kind of handled the negotiations, and like he has such a chip on his shoulder right now, and like there's such a like fuck you, watch what I do, that I
Yeah.
respect guys that do that.
What were you going to say, Matt?
This is. I'm not trying to do like a cop out for him, and I'm not trying to make an excuse for Will Ospreay because again, like the things I don't, or the list of things that I don't really care about Ospreay do, like that annoy me that he does, or I think there are issues that take me out of his matches. That is like that sort of thing that you just described, the no selling or the inconsistent selling. Uh, that's a big one. That's like high up on the list. But one thing he said, and Brad, I know you've heard him say this recently, that he gave an interview where he said a few things. I know like the term nowadays like neurodivergent, but he said he has like a few essentially like disorders. One being like severe dyslexia. Another, I believe he said ADHD.
Mm.
And he also said he was like somewhat on the spectrum. Like that I'm not sure about only because I've dealt with individuals with autism, and that it is a spectrum because it can run the gamut. And I've unfortunately I've dealt with some autistic people who are not even verbal. So I'm not even going to touch like I don't know about that. But when he said like, oh yeah, I have like ADHD, I'm like, huh, because I've dealt with people who have ADHD as well, and it made me pause and like maybe some of this like inconsistent selling actually might just be like the guy. Unfortunately, he may have damn well forgot like, oh, I need to sell the leg, and like his attention span may have been that of like a squirrel, like, trying to cut him a
Actually,
break. But like that might have been the case. Like he may have just been like,
in
oh, his style is like I do a bunch of
in
flips and stuff, and so
fairness,
then he could be like, oh, now I remember to sell. Oh, my sequence is done, so I need to sell again.
I have to give him credit for he's very much a star and he does impressive stuff. Like
Hmm.
I'm not taking away from that. Don't please no one mishear me. But I have a problem with the best wrestler in the world
yeah, I
when
do
there
too.
is an aspect of his wrestling that to me seems so deficient. Like if you
Yeah.
want my favorite example of a really good contemporary seller, oddly enough, is Orange Cassidy, because Cassidy sells the hell out of stuff and it affects what he does.
Mhm.
But you know,
I
Osprey is getting huge reactions. He got a huge contract, and I'm just some jerk off. Never was
He
from the
makes
Indies.
me
So
too.
where I get sad with him though is I'm like, damn, like your promos and stuff are really good, and I know I'm not gonna like your match. And I was gonna say on the ADHD thing, some of us have like hyper good memories with stuff. That's like
Mhm.
you kind of do the opposite sometimes, and like you're really like focused and stuff
mhm.
because you kind of had to teach
I
yourself. Like, so I found out later in life, a couple years ago, and then I had learned to like disassociate and like cope with it and like how to pay attention and stuff. So it just depends.
I'm with you, Shad. Like I don't buy the best wrestler in the world. That
No,
then
but
some people give that to him.
I will
Like people
say,
like Gabe.
I will say though,
Mhm.
he has been the only, he's one of only a couple of needle movers though, which I did not anticipate, but he has been a needle mover for AEW. And I would say there's probably single digit guys, like even Edge didn't really move the needle and Will Osprey did. So I would say um, that is very
To
small company. I think that's like
to
Cody, Kenny, and him, really.
to Edge. I've seen some people. There's a podcast. I don't know. Throw out a I'll give a shout out to a podcast by Trish and Sarah. You should search for that if you don't know that Trish and Sarah. It's on. I know it's on like iTunes. I listen to it. They have done that. They've only been doing this like a few months. Um, but they're pretty good and they break down a lot of AEW stuff. And they made the one of them. I think Trish like made the case like that there was reasons to sign Edge, and it wasn't because like he's gonna pop the ratings every week. Even though you're paying him a lot of money, it's because one, obviously you're built into like an ensemble, cast of wrestlers, but it's because like when he actually will sometimes pop like social media like interest. Like he'll get a lot of like
Is
you
that
put
the
him in.
right logo there, Matt?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
He may like get you a lot of like impressions on like Twitter or something like that, and I've heard some people say like, well, social media doesn't matter, and it's like, well, no, I mean, it kind of does. Like, I mean, people like Dave Meltzer like talks endlessly about how like, oh, like, AEW trended this way. Like, he just had an article like in the last day or so where it's like, I guess WWE did like the Saudi their next Blood Money show, and it didn't like break like the top 20, and he's like, oh, it's a bad thing, and it's like,
It,
it matters or it doesn't matter, but
it
uh,
matters. So I would say it matters in the it is a good barometer of interest where
mhm,
um, where social media is useless and don't do it is do not cater to people on social media. Like don't listen to them because they are not your paying customers. They are very loud and have a lot of opinions, and a lot of times it's not what your customers want, and then those people will say all this stuff and they don't buy your shit because they're on
Yeah.
Twitter all
mhm.
day, so they have no money. But they're
So
a good barometer of general interest, I would
if
say.
I think the way of looking at it is if you look road for the trending and that sort of stuff, if people care about it, if a lot of people care about it, they tweet about it. But you may not don't want to pay attention to the people who tweet a lot about every damn. And so, it's the macro versus micro perspective.
Mhm.
So, it makes sense.
Let me quickly finish a thought I wanted to make. I'm with you, Shad. People like Dave Meltzer like raves about Will Ospreay. I'm sure I'm eager to see what Dave Meltzer's ratings for Double or Nothing were, because I don't know what he will give anything else on the show, but I would be shocked if he gives Will Ospreay versus Roderick Strong anything less than 4 stars. I would be surprised if he gives it 5 or more.
I don't think he's constitutionally capable of giving Will Ospreay less than 4 stars.
Yeah.
That's
So,
that's that's how many hours his erection lasts.
but I
You're supposed to
also
seek
am,
medical help for more than four,
yeah.
Shad.
You're
I am
supposed to.
also I'm also with you, Brad, that it's like Osprey has actually like surprised me, because uh I think I would have thought, or I would have said that the likely situation with people like him or Okada, who working like more of the New Japan schedule, where it's like it's more focused on big shows, a big match at a big show, and then maybe you're doing like a tour in association with the big show, but it's the big important show. But it's like, let me do like a dozen shows where I'm just working like a 6-man or a tag match or something, where it's obviously you save up. So I would have thought like Osprey Okada would have been like, they're more like, are they going to work on like weekly television, because they're more like, let me do like a big match every month, every other month, versus like I'm going to be on weekly television cutting promos and stuff like that. And Osprey has surprised me that he actually has acquitted himself really well, and he's cutting what I feel is pretty good promos, and he's showing like a lot of, he actually could be like, and I could see it's already starting, and maybe it already has already begun. If you're saying he's a needle mover, that he could be like the next breakout star for them, which they kind of, I guess, need, because he's like what, 30, 31,
Yeah,
and
he's
as much
30.
as I
Yeah.
love him, I can argue that he's, like the GOAT. But Kenny Omega, like, I don't know how much longer Kenny Omega is going to be around. Like, we may have already seen like the
He's.
the end of Kenny Omega as like
I think he's
a
probably got a
regular.
couple years because I think he's just hitting that point of.
You may now already see like Kenny Omega like part timer, and that's because like the guy physically has gone through a lot. He allegedly just had surgery for the diverticulitis, and for those who don't know, like surgery for diverticulitis, it's like they mean like they probably did a bowel resection of some sort, so they
Yeah.
cut out
I mean,
the
that's what
infected
ended.
part
That's
of
what
his
ended Brock
intestine.
Lesnar's MMA career. If you don't remember his last MMA fight, he got a liver punch right in where his intestines were missing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Overeem cheated though because then he got popped for roids, so he got punched in the liver
Mhm.
for nothing.
Yeah. It's difficult because like you said, Matt, they kind of have to go through the abdominal wall. And for example, not to be too whatever, but I had kids who came to us by way of C-section, and whenever they do that, they go through the abdominal wall, and that never does heal back the same as it was. So I like Kenny. I think Kenny is a more complete package, but I also don't. I don't think Will is bad. I just think that if he's going to be up on that pedestal, I'm gonna have a really critical eye
this is
of
really gonna pain me because I do think Kenny's the GOAT. I think Osprey does better promos than Kenny does. I don't think Kenny's bad. I would say like Osprey's just a little better in the promo department because Kenny. I don't think Omega's ever talked me into like a match. Like I'm already invested. Like his promos are good, but like there's a couple times where Osprey, like especially this last stuff Osprey did, I was like, man, like I wish I knew I would like you're not going to take me out of the match because like you've really wanted me to pay. Like you have me like right there, money in hand. I'm like, oh, I'm not going to like the match.
No, I'm with you. Like I've been kind of surprised how I thought like the quality of his promo work has been really strong. Kenny, I actually think can cut good promos, and I like it, but I feel like you gotta play to your strengths, and I feel like Kenny when he's best at doing promos when he's just being like a dick. When it's just like regular Kenny cutting a promo, it's like because the real Kenny Omega is kind of just like
a goofball,
like a shy, like yeah, he's like a shy, goofy dude who mostly like plays video games and
I actually had a friend.
hangs out with Kota Ibushi.
He played against Kenny Omega in Street Fighter tournaments years ago.
Okay, so we've discussed two of these guys in our Elder Statesmen, so pick which one you want to talk about first, Sting or Billy Gunn. Let's do Billy Gunn because it'll be a little quicker. So I would say Billy Gunn isn't someone I think had like a bad name or anything. It seems like he's always been a good presence in the back. I would say he's mostly because I don't think he was super well regarded in the ring after like DX stuff through like even TNA. Like people just kind of wanted him to go away. And even like when he was in the Gun Club, I think he was like, people were more interested in him. And then when they started like the scissor me daddy ass thing, like he really took off in a way that I never would have considered.
I think that Billy Gunn's transition from being, how can I best put it, a good tag guy and a bland singles guy to now kind of very clearly in this mentorship role that he's been doing in AEW has been a really nice change. He is, because, I mean, let's be honest, the one Billy Gunn was bland as hell.
Oh, like terrible.
There was nothing to it. But he's been in a lot of good tag team stuff. And then he comes in and he's rolling with his kids and he's rolling with the Acclaimed. And it works because he's not taking focus from them. He's acting as the heavy for the hot tag.
I would actually say the kids have more personality than he's ever had. Especially with like the Bang Bang Gang stuff, like and like Bullet Club Gold, like they really like they went from kind of I could take him or leave him to oh wow, like I am constantly entertained by them and like
I would
and Card
they didn't
Blade.
have a they didn't have a bad reputation, but if we're talking about like a proven reputation, like I would say like the Gun Club, because when they first started out with AEW, I was kind of like, oh god, here we go, like nepotism, like Billy Gunn got his kids a job, like ugh, they're annoying. And then I actually have gone a 180 on them, and it's like, wow, they are like a super entertaining act, and they're funny as hell. Like they have the whole, I guess they've moved away or trying to move away from Bullet Club Gold. I think it's not officially been confirmed, but I think the fact that this most recent pay-per-view they were listed as the Bang Bang Gang, not the Bullet Club Gold. I think they're kind of moving away from that. But the fact that Juice Robinson's back. So the act of Juice Robinson, Jay White, and the Gun Club are like, I think that they were highly entertaining. Gun Club has kind of won me over.
Yeah.
Speaking of someone that I thought was never going to amount to anything and prove me wrong is Juice. Talk about a guy that was a jobber in NXT that bet on himself and like proved everyone wrong.
Yeah, I mean, he kind of. I don't think it really rose above mid card, or I guess it could maybe say upper mid card in New Japan, but
he was like right in that he's in that weird. I don't know if there's a name for it, but he's in that weird like limbo area where you're kind of like the tippy top highest end mid carder possible, but you're not quite an upper mid carder yet.
That's probably fair, but he has, through just force of personality, become like so entertaining.
Florida
that
man,
even if
gimmick.
Yeah, even if they even if they like end it Bang Bang Gang tomorrow, it's like that's a guy who like through his own like he's good enough in the ring in his own like again force of personality. You could keep this guy around for like years as a mid card act, and people would find him entertaining. He'd be perfectly enjoyable.
Yeah, I think so.
I agree that. Well, first of all, I agree with you on the Gun. Whenever you have Bang Bang Gang all together, obviously Juice is this huge presence, especially now that he's back. But it's not the Guns don't, the Ass Boys don't fade into the background. It's like Jay is kind of in the back with the smug nod, and the two of them are keeping up with Juice's lunacy. Like, really impressed with them. And then, Juice just cracks me the hell up with the off the wall stuff he does. Why you want me to go to sleep? I got my 8 hours. I'm good to go. That sort of thing impresses me because it's not like, you're not going to be, it's this manic off the wall response to stuff that I really appreciate because that's hard to do well. So, I would, honest to God, I would kind of be shocked if, well, okay, first of all, Billy Gunn has probably very clearly shepherded the Acclaim to where they are now, which is like that's really good because they're one of the most overacts in the company. I would be shocked if there weren't other people that were talking. I know there are some folks who are like, nobody in the back wants to talk to us. It's like, I've kind of tempered that thought, the idea of like, okay, if I am Ray Phoenix, Private Party, someone like that, does a lot of high flying stuff, but I'm a rookie. It kind of feels to me like Billy Gunn or Dustin Rhodes are probably not people I'm going to go to because
I would
the styles don't exactly line. Like, I would probably seek out somebody who has a style that's kind of more in line with what I
would. I would go to Dustin for anything because
Dustin would too, but
well, what I'm saying though is like, yeah, he might not wrestle your style, but where I think everyone should talk to Dustin is like timing on comebacks and stuff is where he is, I would say, unparalleled by almost anyone when it comes to like comebacks and just timing in general and structure. Like I think anyone should go to him, but like I agree, like if you're like Powerhouse Hobbs, yeah, I'd go talk to Billy Gunn.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Like if I'm
yes, I would talk to Dustin about anything because in my eyes, Dustin Rhodes is the master of doing more with less. He is able to have compelling matches without. He doesn't have to kill himself to do it. He has like 3 or 4 real signature spots he does. He puts together really compelling matches. Like, dude, about how you do that so that I don't have to destroy myself. But if my style is so divergent, then no, I won't. Like you said, but I don't know. We haven't heard a lot of the, people don't go to vets for advice stuff talk.
Well, I think the other problem though, the other problem when people say that now is if I'm a young guy coming up and I'm a flyer, I'm going to go to Darby Allin. He's been on TV for 5+ years now. Like Darby as much as it would bother people, Darby Allin is a vet now.
Or like
Well,
Penta.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like there are guys that are on the roster now that people are gonna bitch and moan about. Like Adam Page. Like you could go to Adam Page if you're a young up and coming babyface.
I would just go to Adam Page to hang out with him. That dude just seems quality.
I mean, honestly, like you know who guys whose brains I would pick that are on the roster now that have seen stuff. I would be going to Stokely. I'd be going to Prince Nana, Swerve, Page, Kenny and the Bucks, Colt.
I would feel bad about going to some of those guys and interrupting. Because you listed a bunch of people who are like top of the card stuff, so they got a lot going on. But once I finally, nutted up, I would love to be able to sit and ask you some questions time and that sort of stuff. Dustin, I absolutely would. Like, good God, it would have been like, okay, if I'm working Collision this next week and we're down at, could I just like get a hotel room for a few nights and then come to your school on Monday because I want to get some pointers or something like. But that's me. Christopher Daniels is a great, a more high flying example. I saw it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw it. That's why I piggybacked on it because it was a really good point. But we don't hear as much about the nobody talks to vets thing. So, Matt,
honestly,
you were going to say something
Roderick
back at the
Strong.
beginning.
Roderick Strong too would be a guy I'd talk to. Mark Briscoe.
Well, yeah, you've actually mentioned guys. Well, that's almost like a ringer because you listen to guys who like are legit vets. I mean, Briscoe, Roderick Strong, they've been around like 15 years or more or something. But I don't know what specific point I was going to make, Shad. Since you like, I think just like when you mentioned Darby, it's like Darby would be a good one to listen to, even just because like the guy, yes, he's been there since like essentially day one, so 5 years in, it's like he's kind of a veteran, or at least a veteran of AEW, but he'd be a good one, a good person to whose brain to pick, just because like that guy he's smaller, but they put him into anarchy in the arena when they obviously needed a spot because like Kenny wasn't going to be part of it, and he's a star, like he's legit a star. Like it's tough to argue that at least in AEW he's not a big star. And I love Darby. Like I think I'm a huge fan. I think I'm one of those people who beat the drum that somewhere down the line, I'm not saying now, I'm not saying he should be the one to defeat Swerve. I just think somewhere down the line, like Darby Allin should get his AEW title.
I think so.
Win and reign, even if he's like a transitional champion. That you're gonna
I have opinions there. I would have last spring during the MJF reign when they were doing the 4 Pillars match. I would have actually like a month before hot shotted the belt onto Darby just to shake things up, and then given it back to MJF at the pay-per-view. But I think that was a missed opportunity to kind of like test the waters. But then I wasn't a big fan of MJF's reign, so I would have any chance to get the belt off of him early would have been okay with me.
I love Darby, but actually go to your thought, Chad. I know, like, I understand what you're saying, like, you don't want to bother top guys, but one guy I actually, since I didn't hear him mentioned, but you should go to is essentially the ace of the company, and Jon Moxley. And I say that because like Jon Moxley, a couple years back, like he signed like a long-term deal, right? And he signed like a 5-year deal, something like that. He clearly like loves AEW. He wants to continue being there. And it's hard to argue that since he signed that contract, things haven't continued to progress positively for him. I mean, the guy is the current IWGP champion and is probably holding that for a while, a few more months, like maybe not, but I don't think that he won't, just because New Japan, it's better for him to hold it. But anyway, like Moxley is a guy who people have gone to him, or he's actually coached people like Marina Shafir. I've always don't quite recall how to pronounce her name, but she's gone to him. He's like high on her. He's given her advice, and he doesn't seem like he's someone who he's not like other people, i.e. Phil, who who has big thoughts about how people should go and kiss his ring and seek his advice. He's a guy. It's like if you probably went up to Mox and it's like, hey, can I get like pick your brain about some stuff? I'm like, I want to help on promos, and I had some thoughts. Like he's a guy who he seems kind of like gruff and introverted and everything like that, but he also seems from stuff I've heard about him that he's actually like a really laid back, funny, cool guy. So he probably would be like absolutely happy to give advice to people and freely share that advice, and it's not a thing. Like he wouldn't be offended by it. He wouldn't make it a big deal, but he would also provide like a lot of knowledge. And he's a guy who I've talked to you guys before about this. Like it's tough to kind of quantify where he fits, but it's hard to argue that for AEW there hasn't been arguably a more important guy than Jon Moxley. And he's been vitally important, I think, to wrestling as a whole, given everything he's done in the last few years, especially like with New Japan and the indie scene, everything like that. But I've kind of equated him. I think like he, in my opinion, he might be almost like the closest equivalent to me of like a modern day like Terry Funk type figure, where he's like everywhere and he's varying up his style. He's like helping out a lot of different companies and just kind of like a unique personality. But I don't know. Moxley, I feel, would be like a good guy, like to fit in that vein. But
my only fear of going up to Moxley is you come up and he's like, "Get in the car, we're going to Vegas," and you wake up 3 days later covered in thumbtacks and covered in blood, and like, why did we just spend the last 3 days like doing every like stupid thing possible?
The other thing that I'd be afraid about.
Gotta learn sometime, kid.
The thing that I would fear about Moxley is that I think that Renee is probably like a sweetheart, but I get the feeling that that daughter of theirs takes after Jon Moxley. So next thing you know, like you wake up with thumbtacks, and then you'd also wake up and there'd be like a fork sticking out of your calf, and he'd probably be like, "My daughter did that. Sorry, she does that." And it's
I don't
like,
know.
what do you mean she does that? And he's like, "Yeah, she likes to stab things." And
Renee,
it's like, I would believe that. I'd be like, "Oh, that actually makes perfect sense to me."
when
yeah,
Danhausen and her went to the carnival, she was like two-fisting like caramel apples like an animal. So she might be a problem.
She probably is.
No, she was like literally like she's rail thin, and they went to that carnival, and she's like holding like 2 apples in the same hand. I'm like, dear God, woman, like.
She probably doesn't hardly eat anything else on show days, because for whatever not to be whatever, but I was always on show days. I was always very picky with what I ate when before a show. So I'm like, okay, I got to have enough protein to get through it, but I don't want to eat it late enough that it's still in my stomach, and I don't want to eat it early enough that I need to take a dump like in the middle of the show or anything like. Seriously, you don't want to. You're getting. Oh boy, okay, this is not gonna. Like I was timing that stuff out, so it wouldn't shock me if Renee is just like, I ain't eating a damn thing all day. We're going to the carnival. John, give me some money. We're going to the carnival.
I guess I never thought about that, but yeah, you don't want to hit that bathroom. And
you don't want a bear in the cave when you're about to hit the curtain.
Yeah, and then you just have like stank ass when you're about to go out on your show, and you're not gonna have time to shower beforehand.
You don't want to pull a Sid.
So I have another. So the other elder statesman was in AEW is Sting. Now, if you listen to Sting give advice, he pretty much just said, "Well, like I give people some advice, but like I think you need to be your own man and like find your own way." Is kind of what he said. Now, why he's on here is I don't think his legacy was totally like ruined or anything.
Mm-hmm.
I just think he belongs on the list because he got to undo the stink of the WWE run.
Such a throwaway. It was so much garbage.
I think he does belong on the list because I agree. It's like if you had asked me like where his play and Sting and Shad, I know you're kind of in the same boat. Like Sting is a personal favorite. I know for Shad, I think he's a personal favorite too. Sting, I will say, like Sting is my favorite probably of all time. Like, and do I think that when I say that, does that mean like, oh, he's the best wrestler of all time? It's like, no, obviously, like they're guys who are better workers than Sting, but in terms of like the total package, everything like that, like Sting is like a favorite of mine. And if you'd asked me, like I loved his WCW, NWA, WCW work. And then when he went to like Impact and everything like that, I enjoyed that too. So if
I
that was
even
it,
like Joker
I would
Sting.
have been like, what?
I even like Joker Sting.
Oh, your Joker's thing. Yeah, I think that I thought his in ring was good enough. I thought his like charisma, his promos, everything like that. He still would have been a favorite of mine. But I do think he belongs on the list because the WWE stuff was incredibly disappointing and frustrating, and it pissed me off because, of course, like he had 2 matches. One, he got obviously what was thought to be a career-ending injury, as Seth Rollins was doing stuff to guys that he wasn't physically capable of doing. Like he's not a big enough guy that you should be
It's
like
a
buckle
dumb.
bombing.
I'm sorry, but the buckle bomb is a dumb move, and no one should be doing it anyway because you're blind
It's
tossing someone. You're blind tossing someone into something where they can't see where they're going, and you have to judge the distance properly. It is a stupid fucking
And you
move.
can't see. Like, there's a way to do it safely,
No, you should.
but nobody does it that way.
Yeah, you should. If I was gonna ban like a move, the buckle bomb would be like in the top 5 of moves I would ban.
it's a dumb move, but if you're gonna do it, if like a guy like Brock Lesnar or like Braun Strowman or someone who has like who are like Claudio Castagnoli, like guys who are either freakishly strong or have like a history of like strongman bodybuilding, where it's like physically they could, in theory, do this. Even people, but I mean, that I guess it's not necessarily like a you can necessarily account for that because people like Nia Jax has done buckle bombs and like horrifically injured like Kyrie Sane
Yeah, but
doing
Nia
that,
Jax is
cussing
not
people.
strong. Nia Jax is not
Well, I
strong.
mean, in theory, she's strong. She's like big, but yeah, like uh, if you're, it's a dumb move. But
I mean, her
if you're
dumbass can't
in
even do
theory,
the butt drop properly.
no. In theory, if you're strong enough to do it, like, yeah. But Seth Rollins, like, no. But the other thing, which is more annoying, is him losing at Mania too. It's just like you're just doing like, oh, the WWE got over
There's
WCW
only
like
there's only
10
one
years after
person.
the fact.
There's only one person that wanted that to happen, and it was Triple H.
Well,
Well,
2, I
Vince
guess.
did.
Vince, yeah.
Yeah. Vince absolutely wanted it. Vince like, oh, the WCW guy.
Yeah.
Oh.
But when Sting came back to wrestling essentially at AEW, I didn't think he'd be anything more than like a manager valet to Darby. And the fact that he started doing cinematic matches, I was like, okay, well, Undertaker did one. Why can't Sting do one? And it was entertaining. And then it progressed to him actually doing real matches, even if it's like tag matches. It's like, yeah, the guy's like 60s, in his 60s. Like he shouldn't. I don't need him out there doing like 20-minute epics
No,
with guys. Like
but
put him in a
then
tag match. Put him in like an 8-minute tag match with Darby. Darby like pinballs around everywhere. Sting comes in there, does some awesome moves. But then it was even beyond that. It's like he could have just come in like, yeah, I'm getting the hot tag. I'm gonna like throw some punches. I'm gonna Hulk up, essentially. I'm gonna do the Stinger Splash and then the Death Drop or the Scorpion Deathlock and win the match for the
yeah,
team. He didn't do that. It wasn't just that. It was like,
Revolution
let me jump
2022
off
was a
like
game changer.
yeah, it's like let me get on top and like do like a 20-foot stage dive at like 62, 63. And it's like, what are you doing? You're no offense, like you're an old man. Like, don't do that. Like I love you. I don't want you crippled. Please don't cripple
No, I
yourself.
remember the first time he did it was Revolution 2022 because I was like, oh, that's cute. They'll have Darby do something. Then Sting gets up there, and I was like, oh shit, he's going for it.
Yeah, he jumped off the top of the tunnel onto that table stack, and
Yeah.
I was like,
And you could
wait,
just see the look on his
wait,
face.
what?
He's like, if I die, I leave a beautiful corpse, and then went for it.
He's
But-
up there, and he looks, and he kind of shrugs, and I'm like, no, you're not.
But that's the beauty of it. It's like it's clearly a guy. It's like he wanted to set his legacy in stone, and at that age, is also I guess he took the attitude. It's like, you know what? Screw it. I don't care. This is the last thing I do. The last spot I do. It's gonna even the match. If you guys, I probably don't. Shad, I highly doubt that you saw it. Brad, you may have seen it, but I think it was last year. It was
Was it the
one
Muda
of one of
retirement?
yeah, one of Muda's like 5 retirement matches. And Muda did like a retirement tour where he did every other week he was doing like, oh, this is the last time for this version of Muda. It's like
Yeah.
it's the same Muda, you just wore like different face paint. But anyway, like he did like a tag match with Darby and wasn't it his like Jinsei Shinzaki?
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
Yeah. It was like a 6-man tag. Like that was like super entertaining. Like that, like I, one of his things, like he never lost like his aura. Essentially, he always had this amazing aura, and people like overuse that term. Because Roman Reigns goes out there and does like his community theater bullshit for like 30 minutes in a WWE main event. People are like, oh, the aura of Roman Reigns. It's like, no, this isn't aura. Like Sting had aura. Like he had a presence
Yeah.
about him. It was amazing. And then Sting had what is arguably one of the best like retirement matches of all time because he just put on an amazing tag match with Darby and against the Young Bucks. And the Young Bucks are fantastic, so it's hard to have a bad match
Yeah.
with the Young Bucks, even if you try. But it was fantastic. Like he was amazing. So he walked away like and it just built up to where it's like this is like legendary status. And to me, like he's my personal goat. But yeah, I think this people like Dave Meltzer, who again, like I love hate relationship in many ways with Meltzer, only because like real life Dave is like a nice guy, good guy, like great to talk to, but sometimes he gets on about stuff that it's like, what are you thinking, Dave? And one of the things he said, it's like, oh, I don't think Sting's like back at least a few years ago. He's like, I don't think Sting's like Hall of Fame material, and it's
Yeah, Sting got in
like
though, so
who,
haha.
like who's Hall of Fame? Like you'll sit there and passionately argue that like Pampero Furpa who like people like who are you talking about? Like, yeah, exactly. You hate to be like, you know,
I mean, he's a legit star. It's just he was on
a
like the 50s and
Middle
60s.
Eastern dude by way of like Argentina back in the day, like 50 years ago. Like Dave will like argue about that or some luchador that you've never heard about. And I'm not saying they're not great, but it's like but he'll like, oh, I don't think Sting. It's like, well, then who like Sting deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. Like in my opinion, this is like cements him as a Hall of Famer.
Yeah, he should have been in there just because. I mean, if you want to get like super technical about it, 1997 alone should get him in there because there's people with weaker resumes that have gotten in. Like he has a better resume than Kurt Angle for the Hall of Fame. But so since we're on the Sting train, let us do his buddy who also is kind of had a legacy resurgence. So this is Lex Luger. Now, Lex has had it on numerous fronts, I would say. So, a number one, doing the convention circuit, and he seems like he has changed a lot since his stroke, for the better. And he's like, if you meet him, he's a very nice person. But where I think he's also kind of gotten like a resurgence and like thought of better is people have started watching this old stuff and they're like, holy shit, like he was actually good and like he got screwed by the booking. Like there's a great Brian and Vinny clip, I think, where they're talking about like the SummerSlam 93 and they go on this huge rant.
92 WCW. And by 92, like mid 92 even, he was gone. Like
I think
he
by
had left
March of 92 he was gone.
yeah, he had left WCW, but some really more like the 91 stuff. But we watched and it was like, oh my God, like Luger was actually good. He's like a good worker.
Because he had a good match with Ron Simmons, and was it Rick Steiner he had like a stupidly good match with?
Yeah, he was good. And it's like, all right, this isn't like he isn't being carried. Like he actually was good. Like he was good. Um, and then it does make you watch like other stuff that he did over like at least like the 90s. Like not that he was bad in the 80s, but obviously he was younger, so he didn't have like the experience that he would eventually develop in the 90s. But uh, thinking about like his mid 90s WWF stuff, I know there's always sorts of like there's rumor controversy. I don't know if it was legit or not because I haven't
He just
fully
didn't
listened to like
fit.
stuff like that from the Observer, but it's always the rumor was that he was going to win the title at WrestleMania 10, and then like he like blabbed about that, so he was punished by not winning the title. But in retrospect, it's like no, actually Vince should have probably put the title on him for a while, like a few
Yeah,
months, because he actually
SummerSlam '93 should have, because he was getting over
yeah
like
he was over, and he actually probably would have made him like not that he had a trash career, but it's like if he had won the title and then held it for like 6 months, even like lost it at Mania, like it probably would have made him like he would
Yeah.
have he'd be
and
considered probably more favorably by people
even then we watched
over time.
that King of the Ring match with Tatanka was surprisingly good. That 15-minute draw, because they were not like just laying around trying to like kill the time. Like they did stuff, and like there was good psychology where like he became increasingly desperate to end it and like just started throwing bombs on him like that. I mean
Yeah,
that match, I'm not saying that was like an epic. I was like, wow, that was like a surprisingly good match.
I
yeah.
think.
Oh, go ahead,
I'm
Chad.
sorry.
Sorry.
Give me just a minute.
Yeah,
I was going back over it and thinking about it and doing some reading on it not long ago, and I came to the conclusion it's like, because correct me if I'm wrong, when Luger was in WCW in late '80s, early '90s, was he using the torture rack at that point, or was he finishing
Yeah,
with
he
something
was
else?
using it pretty early.
Okay, he goes to the WWF, and they're like, no, don't use that. Use a running forearm to the head.
Well, he always used the forearm. I just think
Right, but it went from being his setup. Like the torture rack is just it's a cool spot. You get this dude who's strong, who gets somebody up on their shoulders, and the idea is he's up there and he's pulling on him and he's racking on him, and the guy's like, no, I give up. He's tearing me in half. And the number of times when I was in high school, I'd walk down the hallway and just randomly see somebody get torture racked in the hallway.
I
Like if I
think
had $1 for every time, I could have bought a new N64 game, something like
oh,
that.
I'm sure that I've done it a few times to my oldest daughter, and she just like laughs and giggles whenever I
Yeah.
do it. So it's like
I would have to
I'm not
look.
really hurting her.
I would have to pull up the roster at the time and see what everyone's finishers is. I have a suspicion that they did not want people using finishing moves at the time, and like 3 people on the roster, like Doink and Bret Hart, were the only people using submission finishers at the time.
But what that means is that they hamstrung one of. On Nitros, you'd see guys torture racking each other sitting in the front row, right? Like,
Yeah,
but
but
it's
when
like, no, you're going to use that forearm as a finish. It's like,
when has Vince never kneecapped someone with stupid decisions?
yeah, and this was something from a Raven Shoot interview a long time ago. Was if you're going to have a heel and give him a nickname, you want it to be a nickname the heel would hate. Like when he was working Portland with Roddy Piper, and he was Scotty Flamingo. He goes, and he was kind of worried about getting over as a heel. And Piper said to him, "It's like, okay, whenever the camera rolls, I want you to be picking your nose." And he goes, "What?" He goes, "Just do it." And what that started was Snotty Scotty, and he had a reason to be mad about that. And he's like, Lex Luger in the WWF, they're like, "Oh, it's Flexi Lexi." He's like, why is he supposed to be mad about that?
Like, oh yes, I do like to
what
flex.
He likes to, yeah. If he was mad about flexing, he wouldn't do it. But he's flexy, like it's like, what the hell is that? And yet, so it seems like that a whole bunch of tools that he had were taken away from him because Vince, I guess, I don't know. But then he goes back to WCW and he's got those back to him, and it works. It got him over, and but his time in the WWF established him as a choke artist.
Well, he was
because he never.
88 did a lot of damage to that too, though.
Well, okay, yeah, that's fair, but yeah, he got unfairly saddled with the choke artist thing. But then again, Lex Luger.
They kind of did exactly what JCP did to him, so it was unfortunately like it happened to him twice.
But then, him winning the title off Hogan on Nitro 100 was massive.
It was big.
It was huge. And then they made him chump by 3 days,
You know,
that following weekend, just
Well,
chumping
yeah,
the
but
shit
I
out of
see.
him.
I would argue. I would argue though that moment still is fine, and like him losing a week later, to this day, no one gives a shit. Like that moment's still cool. Like you don't remember you only had it for 6 days. You just remember the
No,
moment.
yeah.
but at the time, it hurt his momentum in a big way. This is a guy
Well,
who
he
put the
was.
entire NWO on that Nitro and then beat Hogan, and then he gets sucker punched in that match, and
He
everyone's kind of like
was.
air out of the balloon.
He had that. He like they didn't do a lot with him afterwards, but he was still over. But I just think he was. I think that was a situation where it was just his time to move down. The way the roster was moving about, because you had Goldberg coming up, and he had those good matches with Bret Hart in like '98. But I just and then he was kind of, I think the crowds got sick of him around then. But um, sometimes you just got to move down. DDP like was coming up. Like it was just a weird confluence of events, and
I'm just saying that if you're going to put him over for the world title and then take it off of him less than a week later, people are going to, it's going to kill momentum. He's not, and again, a consistent challenger. He got lucky once. Now,
he
the
beat him in
moment's
the.
still awesome, but
I feel like I agree with both of you. Like, I think it was an awesome moment. I think him losing it doesn't take away from that awesome moment. But I also feel like you were right, Chad, that it did cut off his momentum. But I also agree with you, Brad, that there were there were actually guys like Goldberg and DDP who were kind of like rising. So it did kind of make sense. Like you don't want to have like a 6-month Lex Luger reign.
And sometimes
There's a whole other separate sidebar thing where if you, and I didn't actually know this until recently, but I don't know why I never like had heard these details, but like it's still part of like the whole like Hulk Hogan contract that he signed back in the day. Like if you actually listen to like the details of the Hogan
oh, it's
contract that he
insane.
signed when he signed with WCW, it was insane. Like in today's day and age, if something like Will Ospreay or like Okada, something like that, you hear like, oh, Tony Khan signed Will Ospreay, like this is the details of his contract. You would be like, Tony Khan, what the are you
He
doing?
was
Like
getting
the
people
money
talk
that
about
was promised to him, like
what he
the
was getting off
creative
of
control,
with the cut
insane.
he was getting cuts. Like this is why when people try to prop up Bischoff like he knows what he's talking about, go read about the Hogan contract, because he was getting
Oh,
like
idiot,
there were
idiot.
situations where his contract worked in such a way that if they drew more, they actually got less money because he got so much of it. Because he was getting he
Yeah.
was getting a piece of tickets, he was getting a piece of like pay-per-view. And I mean, good on him for getting the bag, but it was
is a
insane.
But
bad contract.
when I heard the details of that contract, it was like, why is anyone listening to Eric Bischoff anymore? Because just the details of this contract, this is such a bad contract.
All-time bad
That
contract.
who's the dude? God, I can't. I'm like drawing a blank. But who's the MLB player who like signed like a 20-year contract and
Oh,
like is still getting paid?
Bobby Bonilla.
Bobby Bonilla. Like it's like this is actually worse than that. Like Bobby Bonilla is like still getting paid because of this ridiculous
No, they
contract.
Million
deferred.
Hulk Hogan
a year.
WCW contract is dumber. It's like you literally should. If WCW was making like 100 million a year, it's like you still would be losing money potentially because that's how dumb the contract. Like you'd be giving like so much of that money to Hulk Hogan
Yeah,
just
it
because
was
of this
terrible.
contract. To anyone who and Eric Bischoff is like behind all that. So it's like
Yeah,
anyone who thinks like, oh, Eric Bischoff, like business genius because he won like ratings war by like at this point I almost have to consider luck
I
against the
consider
Vince McMahon WWE. It's like no, like he's an idiot. Like stop listening to him because you have like an ideological preference for WWE or against AEW for some reason. Like the guy doesn't know what he's talking about.
Bischoff's biggest strength being good handling TV. You know, getting the shows they got, getting them in the time slots they got, like that sort of stuff. I'll give Bischoff credit for. But that's where I'm gonna look. You get the personalities you had together and the angle that was, I mean, not to parrot the point too much, but taking an angle from New Japan and then using it here with the personalities you have, okay, yeah, that's gonna take off. It is. It's a huge thing. It's something very different, and yeah, it's gonna be a big deal.
I don't even think. I mean, New Japan was
But
probably he probably did steal it from Japan because that was more like recent. But I don't even think that was probably like uh, a novel with New Japan. I think that's the whole concept of an invasion probably had been around for years. I don't know where you would actually trace it, but
Invasion
I have
angles.
to imagine.
well,
Yeah,
Okay,
Bischoff
so
taking the idea of the NWO out of the New Japan thing.
I think it goes. It'd have to go at least in the 80s. I mean, you
so
had
you have New Japan and UWFI. Ishingun going to All Japan in '85 could kind of be seen as an invasion. I think you can attribute um, Savage, Lanny, and Angelo showing up in Memphis after ICW closed.
that actually was one that kept because what was the name of the PAFO promotion? Was it IWC?
ICW
ICW.
yeah.
ICW. Sorry, I like converted
from Lexington,
the
Kentucky.
initials. Yeah, so ICW, like I remember they had an invasion angle of sorts with Memphis,
And then they
but
'93 they had the WWF versus USWA angle. They
USWA.
did it with Smoky Mountain. They did it with ECW. Uh,
Didn't Watts want to do an invasion angle? WWF.
maybe.
There was something about that. And
Oh
I
no, they're
cannot
gonna do
remember the details.
SMW and WCW because they kind of did an
Well,
angle.
No. I mean, with UWF, I can't remember the details, but there he did an interview and he was talking about how it should have been an invasion thing. Maybe it was when
when
UWF was
Crockett
going
brought
into
it's
yeah,
when Crockett brought it. They should have done that.
yeah, but they didn't do that then.
Yeah, so it's not like I wouldn't say it's a novel. And funny fact, not that I don't know if they had read it. So Phil Singer Games has like a fictional universe called Champions of the Galaxy. So each edition is a new year. And in the early '90s, I think it was maybe mid '90s. It was before the NWO, but he did this 3-4 set storyline where this billionaire essentially called Magnus Colby. This billionaire essentially called Magnus Colby opened his own promotion called the CPC versus the GWF, and like he had his own champions, but then they would challenge the GWF champions, and he would just keep signing all these GWF guys because he had all this money. So it was, if you read the books, it's very similar in how the NWO worked. Just they had their own belts, but like the concept is very eerily similar to
It's just the doing that particular angle with the people you had to do it. Sure, that was gonna. But then it got bloated and ran too long, and it never officially ended. Where there had to be at some point, there had to be a final victory over them that never got. It just kind of sputtered out and died.
It's actually amazing how Triple H is making every single one of the same mistakes with the Bloodline that they made with the NWO.
Well, we're already on. I feel Bloodline.
Silver and
I think we're edging
and
towards like
silver.
Bloodline. Yeah, Bloodline Black and Silver versus Bloodline Wolfpack.
Where you have guys pretending to be Samoans that aren't even Samoan now.
Yeah, I'm sure that's a Triple H thing. Oh, they're all brown, so it's like, come on, like dude.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, you have Solo Sakai and some Pacific Islanders.
Well,
versus,
you know what makes them look bad is
maybe
they put all this time and effort into Solo Sakai, and I honestly think Tamatonga is run down as he is more interesting than him, like instantaneously.
Tamatonga is past his prime. And I'm not saying I dislike Tamatonga. And I actually do think he's still capable of like at least decent matches. Great matches, no. I actually don't hate like the Guerrillas of Destiny. I think that they are a few years past their
They're like 5 years if you
sell
ask
by
me.
date.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're a few years past their sell by date. Like, I know there was a Bloodline angle, but really it's like if you really wanted them when they were better,
You could have had him probably.
you like 5 years ago, yeah, that's like when you probably should have got them. And it's tough to say that because again, 5 years ago, you're about to enter into like COVID and everything like that. So obviously like a lot of real life events, but I mean, I feel like they're at least 5 years past their sell by date. But even so, it's like I didn't hate Guerrillas of Destiny. I think Tangaloa is like
He's god awful.
just awful now.
He was never
Was
good
he
to
the
begin
one-
with.
You're
He was
Was
You're
he the
better
one
off
that
trying
had that clip of that combo he was trying to do on Okada? Was that him?
Yeah,
Yeah.
he also
That-
fucked
this
up
is the
his
speed.
debut.
This is like real life representation. And
Yeah,
you have
I
to, like,
was-
poor Okada has to sell for that. And
I
people
was-
people literally had the audacity to be like, oh, look at Okada, like he's so like over this like anarchy. And it's like Okada has the biggest shit-eating grin on his face as he's doing everything in anarchy in the arena because it's like, yeah, he doesn't want to be there, like he's lost his aura. And it's like, are you watching the same thing? Because Okada goes out there and just hams it up as a heel, and you could tell that this dude is getting paid well and is having the time of his life. Like this dude is if this guy was like, yeah, I'm good, peace out, deuces, and like left wrestling altogether, absolutely like deserving Hall of Fame, should be up there with like
Legend.
Inoki, Baba, Misawa, Kawhi. Like he should be like considered one of the best Japanese wrestlers of all time, legitimate. But he doesn't want to do that. He wants to continue wrestling, and he's having the blast of his like a time of his life. And he has to go. But before this, like he has to go out there and self like
Yeah.
like slow motion chops and act like, oh, it's hurting me. And
that
it's like,
clip pissed me off because I watched that and went, I know full damn well I was better than that, and I never was. And it's
Yeah.
like, holy shit, this guy's working with Okada, and I am 100% sure that I would have had. And I'm just like, it kills me.
The problem, Brad, I know you know this. You know this. The problem is that this is all we're gonna what let's see, what date is it? It is May 28th when we're recording this. You know that they're gonna push this out another 6 months because you're gonna see Roman Reigns, probably Jimmy and Jey Uso, and Sammy.
No, it's gonna go. It's gonna go
Bloodline OG versus Solo Sakai, the Guerrillas of Destiny, whatever they're going to be called, and because they signed him, Jacob Fatu. So you're going to see Bloodline Silver and Gold versus Bloodline Wolfpack in a War Games match at Survivor Series. That's where this is going.
No, they'll
money on the table.
They'll keep it going till Mania because they don't wrap anything up till Mania now.
But isn't Mania supposed to be like Cody versus Rock?
Yeah, but they don't care about anything unless it's like 2 or 3 events a year. They don't like that. Like that's the problem. Is they're a content mill now. They don't care to actually finish anything because they're just putting out content. Now, okay, I have 2 left, and then I think Shad might have a few. But so, I have a bigger name and a current name. So I'm gonna go with a current name. So this is Eddie Kingston. I once remember a post. Probably about 2017, someone asked, why isn't Eddie Kingston a bigger star? And my reply that got a lot of positive support was, because he's a drunken fuck up, was my reply to why he wasn't a big star in 2017. And he really got his act together and has become, I think, one of the best things in wrestling for about 4 years now.
I went from not really knowing much about Eddie to we saw him in that one NWA thing that we reviewed, and I was blown away by that, like the fact how well he handled that. And then he shows up and cuts that promo on Cody Rhodes, and I was just like, and ever since then I've been like, I need more Eddie. I need more Eddie Kingston. and he's hurt now. He's out for like up to a year, and I'm like, put him in the booth. You know why? This is the guy that called the debut of Dragon. I trust him to sell anything you put in that ring.
He's awesome. He did Elevation, and he just drops like weird stuff. Like they were doing something like, oh yeah, this is like when Mr. Wrestling 2 turned on Magnum TA, and I'm like, oh, he's dropping the stuff, and then like he would do Big Show loved him. Like Big Show would just laugh at his stuff, and like Kira Hogan came out once, and he's like, I don't like her, and they're like Big Show's asking him, and like you can tell like when he was like getting around, I was like, oh, she's too ghetto for me, so I don't like her. Is what he was like essentially saying. But no, he's great because he just drops like the most random stuff on you. Like he would be like, oh, as Gordon Soley would call it, a souffle was one of his favorites.
Yes, I say it as a joke, but all the stuff he called in that Dragon debut match, he's so excited and so into it, and he's the Ipanenza, the double drop kick, the sweeps, like he is so fired up for everything. It's like, dude, fine. Let him be on commentary until he's ready to go again, because the guy will the guy could sell a refrigerator in the Arctic Circle. Like I am here for it.
And if you think my previous assessment of him was harsh, he's essentially said as much about himself in like interviews and stuff.
Yeah.
So
and I think he wouldn't call himself a drunken fuck up. I would say he would call himself a self-destructive fuck up, is I think what he essentially calls himself.
He probably would, because there have been I feel not in the last like couple of years, but there have been times where there was a time a couple of years ago where he had maybe it was like it
was the Jericho match where he said like he had to really like fight the urge to like fuck it all up right there because his depression.
Was it
like
that or was it? Oh, it actually may have been. It may have actually been like the really good match he had with Miro. Maybe it was that or the Jericho. But one of them, it's like he kind of like almost like disappeared for a month or was like quiet on social media or whatever. And he since like deleted his Twitter, but I mean, he was quiet for like you didn't really see much of him for like a month or something like that. And he then like essentially did an article that was published where he's like, yeah, I had like dealt with like depression.
Yeah.
And everything afterwards because like people were like raving about my match. And it's like I have self-destructive tendencies where it's like people were like legit telling me like that was a great match, like I loved it, it was like, you were awesome and everything like that. And in my mind it's just like he nitpicking everything he did wrong, and it's like I no, it's terrible. I can't deal with your praise, like it's messing me up. And it's like I think he's better since then, because obviously he's had even more success since then.
I think he's probably got a better support structure, gotten some therapy or something. Because he reminds me of, there's a meme I love. It's like a possum, and it's like, I have 99 problems, I cause 98 of them.
That's a pretty good meme.
I think Eddie, the best example for him doing better was the Continental Crown. The dude was holding 3 titles at the same time, and you never heard anything from him about not deserving it or anything. Like he just went with it, and so he didn't, shoot himself in the foot.
You know what I think happened there?
Kind of get. Well, hang on. I kind of get where he's coming from, because I have confidence in myself that I can do a good job in a lot of things that I do. But as soon as someone starts heaping praise on me for it, my immediate reaction is like, no, let's not. And I have a hard time accepting that. Now, it's not as superlative as Eddie's might be, but I kind of get it.
I think Tony was just like, Brad. I think to that is Tony was probably just like, look, I know how you are, so I'm just gonna give you so many belts that you can't do that to yourself. Like you'll be too busy trying to figure out where to put each of them when you come out to doubt yourself.
So, are you? Did you finish your thought?
Go for it.
So the point I was going to make is that I've been a wrestling fan for God, like 30 years now because I started watching this when I was a kid. And as much as I love wrestling, and I've said before, like even periods that I'm not actively watching it, I at least like try to follow what's happening because that's how much of like a fan I've been. I will at least like try and keep abreast of what's going on, even if I'm not actively watching it. Last few years I have been actively watching it, but even as much as a wrestling fan as I am, there at any given point, I can be a fan or appreciate 100 different workers, but there's usually only like a handful or less of workers that really like I feel I get like an emotional connection to for whatever reason because they're like really good workers or there's something. And obviously we talked earlier about guys like Sting. It's like I've always loved Sting. Like that's obviously a guy who's always like sparked a connection with me. But they're guys that I've developed like an emotional connection to where it's like anything they do, I'm captivated by. I'll watch their match, I'll listen to their promo, whatever. People like Bryan Danielson in recent years is one of them. Kenny Omega. Obviously, these guys are huge stars. People love them, super popular. So that's not abnormal. But I would say in recent years, like Eddie Kingston is one of those guys because he's a good worker. I think he's put on really good matches. But beyond that, just anything he says, like his promos are fantastic. But beyond that, it's like he is almost. I want to liken him to people like Dusty Rhodes back in the day, where it's like was Dusty Rhodes the best worker? No. I'm not saying he was a bad worker. Was the best worker? No. Uh, but he could. So when he says promos, when he gives promos and everything like that, and like the pain he will share and like the intensity and everything like that, it's like it's actually coming from like a real place. So that adds to it. Like how can you not connect emotionally with a guy who in real life has faced some real demons? And I guess I'm also really appreciative of Eddie in the last few years because I mean he's been very open about his personal demons. He's been open with stuff where it's like before AEW, and I believe this, like he was on the verge of retiring. It's like I was gonna sell my wrestling boots because
Yeah.
to pay rent, like that's how bad things were. And then I got this opportunity from AEW, and it you cannot say like he didn't take that opportunity. And whatever sports analogy you want to use, he hit a home run, hit it out the park, he scored the touchdown, whatever. Like he took that and he ran with it. And he's one of the legit most popular stars in AEW. I'll hands down argue that. And it's tough to not like love the guy. Like he's a guy that in a business that can be so scummy, like we've talked about it. Like we even talked like last episode, last show that guys who like ruin their reputation because of their own personal demons, their own issues, their own like faults. And here we're talking about guys who've made do, like they've actually improved things. But it's like this is a guy like he could have been a cautionary tale. This guy who like was a good worker, good promo, a lot of charisma, everything. He could have been like, well, yeah, he could have been better than he was, but he never was because,
Couldn't get out of his own
guy
way.
couldn't stop with the substance abuse. Like, yeah, couldn't get out of his own way, like emotional issues, psychological issues, etc. And maybe that would have been the story of his like career. And you would look at guys like back in the we talked about him before in the show, even did like a show on him. But like someone like Eddie Gilbert, a lot of talent, good worker, great wrestling mind, good promo, like a lot of charisma. Could have been way more than he was. Personal demons destroyed his life. That could have been the Eddie Kingston story, but it wasn't. Like he was actually able to overcome, sign with AEW because I don't know why. Tony Khan actually saw the talent. Maybe Tony Khan, who I feel
They did that
it's probably a
invitational
Ring of
thing, and
Honor.
they were bringing guys in like for one-offs because they brought in quite a few people. Like Warhorse came in, and like it wasn't that great, so they never really signed him. But I think he did it. I I am guessing what happened is one of the elite was like, "Hey, let's give him a shot. He's good," and then he cut
So,
that promo, and the rest is history. On
Yeah,
so part of the story is that Eddie's in that space where he's not going anywhere and he's not making it. And he's thinking about selling his stuff, and he heard about the open challenge promo, the open
mhm.
challenge thing, and he's doing an indie show. I can't remember where it is. And he cuts his promo. He says, if they're going to do this open challenge thing, they need to bring me because I'm the kind of, Cody Rhodes says he's all this sort of stuff and he ain't got nothing on me and that sort of thing. And apparently word got around. And so they had him come out and do that promo. You don't grind, you ain't got it promo he did at Cody. And there was such an outpouring of support on how awesome it was. The whole hire Eddie Kingston thing took off. And they did. And it was Eddie called his shot, got an opportunity to go on TV and do it, and killed it. Like, he earned where he is now. So, Eddie Kingston's one of my favorite guys in wrestling now. And a few years ago, I didn't know who the hell he was. So,
I mean, I knew who he was, but
I knew him from Chikara. Because I was up on Chikara for a while. Then we watched one of my favorite Chikara matches on the show, which was his Mike Quackenbush match on High Noon, which really good match if you haven't seen that. If you want to, it's probably one of his best matches, I would say. I really have to think about his AEW work. I know, like, the Chris Jericho match, I really loved.
The mirror.
By the way, we have a note in the chat from More Different Brad. He said Eddie was working ICW No Holds Barred against Brent Ison in New Jersey when he cut that promo. I couldn't remember what the promotion was, but there you go. That's context. AEW stuff that he's done that I loved. His stuff with Danielson. Just loved it.
I did like. I know I don't like Punk, but that match he did with Punk where he like backfists him to the futures at like the first 5 seconds
before the bell rings. Yeah.
Well, even like the promo battle they had before, and again, like that's a whole we've talked about Punk on the show
ad nauseum.
We could talk more about Punk. I am very negative. I think I would at the moment I'm very negative where it's like I think Punk signing with AEW was an overall net negative that we're still dealing with repercussions of. But
yeah,
I'm not trying to rehash all of that, but the promo battle that Punk and Kingston went into, which was almost, if you know, like some of Eddie's backstory, was almost like a work shoot. That where Punk is like, yeah, you know what, you're a bum. You're an absolute bum because you had so much potential and you've wasted it. Like, there's actually truth in that. Like, he did waste a lot of his potential, but the fact that he has been able these last few years to rise above that and deliver something like almost like legendary. I feel like this is making this AEW run is making his career. And he's a little bit older in that he's like 40 or into his early 40s. That doesn't mean that he needs to hang it up. Unfortunately, he just got badly injured, so he's going to be out for like a year or so. But I agree with you guys that he's too entertaining. He's too good. Like, you don't want him to just be like sitting at home for like a year. Like, I understand like he needs surgery. He's out for a bit, but yeah, like bring him back. Like the AEW media rights deal is still ongoing. I doubt we're going to see AEW Dark or Elevation return.
No.
So the opportunities for him to do commentary may be like more limited, but it's like maybe you bring him on like for Rampage or something like that. But like you should bring Eddie Kingston back because he does have like a wealth of knowledge. He's incredibly entertaining. Even if like he was like, you know what, guys, I can't come back from this injury. I'm gonna retire. Like, that's a guy. It's like you don't want to lose him.
No.
Like, hire him as a coach. Like, have him work with people on promos. Have him work with people on developing characters. Like, he is fantastic. He has like a wealth of knowledge. He's too entertaining. He's too good. He's too talented. And the fact that he has, I'm not saying his career is over, but like so far, how he has able to overcome his earlier demons and the things that were affecting his career to having an absolute great run. He's become one of the most essential and most beloved, I would feel like, characters in in AEW is to me like I would say it's heartwarming because like I appreciate him so much. I connect with him so much that I'm glad to see him reach that level of success.
I think that when Eddie's in ring is done, put him on commentary and or make him a manager because he is a guy that could do it and he would kill it. Can you imagine Eddie talking somebody up would just, God, it would be amazing. Like, yeah, I'm all in with you on it. Like, I adore Eddie Kingston. He's fantastic.
Okay, so I have one left on my list, then we can get to any that you guys have. So this is kind of, I call him the anti Ric Flair, which is kind of ironic because of their storied history together. So this is Dusty Rhodes. Now, why I call him the anti Ric Flair is where he really changed things is he went away and let people kind of like come down from like the late 80s, early 90s stuff with him where people were kind of burnt out on him and his booking and stuff. Then, he got involved with NXT, and I would argue like a lot of NXT's success was built on him. He had a lot to do with young generation and mentoring and really helping them along. I think he even had a stint. Didn't he book SmackDown for a while when it was kind of good?
I don't know.
But so he's kind of the anti-Flair, where like we talked about how part of Flair's problem is he doesn't go away.
Yeah, Flair doesn't leave the eye long enough for you to miss him.
And
although at this point, I would say you only miss him because you don't have good enough theme.
And I do remember this isn't political, but it was kind of political. But I remember Dusty went like I think Atlanta, Georgia had this big ice storm, and he went on this like Twitter tirade just ripping the local government because people were getting like stuck on the freeway because of the ice storm, and he was just ripping the local government for their incompetence.
And where was this?
Atlanta, Georgia.
Let me tell you something, Daddy. You got to get out there and scrape those roads. You got to get people home to their families. Look at me. Look at me. People are trying to get home from the arm there, Daddy.
They have
and let me tell you something. Ole Anderson, you do not go out there and take the ice and salt off the roads.
I would probably side with Dusty, but I've heard that about like southern states.
Well, they don't have they don't have apparatus for it because it's
they don't have the infrastructure for
it. And people don't drive in it, so they don't know because like you'll go down there and they'll be like, "Oh, it snowed," and it's like, "Oh, okay." Like, how many inches did you get? Like, and it was just white in the air, and they're like, "Oh, well, sure."
Yeah. Oh, it's like 2 inches, and like they shut down. Like, I mean, my wife is from. I said before, my wife is from San Antonio, and it rarely snows, but if it snows like 2 inches, it's like, oh, shut everything down. It's like 2 inches. It's like it's
but
done.
they don't know how to deal with that too.
Like
yeah,
my brother lives in Corpus. My brother lives in Corpus Christi, and whenever it showed up there, police had to block and manned roads to be like, no, you cannot use this because people were going up those and just slamming the hell into things because they wouldn't listen.
Yeah.
Chad, I will say this: I live in Washington D.C.
Mm-hmm.
Not that it's like, the Northeast or Chicago where we could get dumped with like a foot of snow routinely, maybe at least once or more every like winter. Snow is not abnormal here. Like we will get snow. This past winter, so literally just like a few months ago, they like shut down the schools like a day or two. And this now because my oldest daughter is like in school, like pre-K. They shut it down. I think it was like 3 to 4 inches, and it's like I never got a day off for like maybe like for 3 to 4 inches when I was a kid. I would get like a 2-hour delay.
It would depend.
And
they
shut it down, and I was like, "This is bullshit." Like I have to take a day off work to deal with my kid. Not that I love my kid, but it's also like I was planning on working that day, so it's like now I got to take a day of leave because of like 3 to 4 inches. It's like I get it.
When I was
Like,
in school, it
I get
depended
that, like,
on.
Atlanta that has no infrastructure, like, they would shut down. So I get it. I appreciate it. But I would agree with Dusty. It's like, this is kind of ridiculous.
I think when I was in school, you could get off for 3 to 4 inches. It depended on the ice fall and like if it hit late and they weren't able to get out there. Like where I live isn't like Michigan or any of like the Great Lakes areas. So, you if you go to work, it might be bad, and then it's fine by the time you drive home. Now, like if you go up to Michigan where they get much more snow, like they have that shit off the road like instantaneously.
Yeah, they're ready for it.
Yeah.
Like here in Kentucky, we get it once every few years, but it happens often enough that we're ready for it. But we also say, "Hey, stay home. You don't get enough practice to know what you're doing until we get this cleaned off."
Yeah, see, I don't give a shit. Like, cause like Columbus isn't terrible, but we get about 24 inches a year is about the annual snowfall, and
Yeah,
people
you're
freak out.
far enough
Pretty
north to get
decent.
it regularly.
But people freak out about that. Like, that's a lot. Like, no, like you get 2 inches here, you get 3 inches there. Like, um, it adds up real quick. But it's like, yeah, like so I drive probably 2 or 3 times a year in it when it's bad, so I don't give a crap because I'm used to it. It's like, oh, you're just gonna take it slow, like all the things to do, like, um, but like if you don't get that experience, especially when you're young and stupid, like that's when you really need to learn how to do it. Is when you're dumb. And I'll be honest, like the first time I ever had to do it is the worst I've ever seen. Even as a 43-year-old, the first time I've never had as bad as the first time. I was at a basketball game in high school, and it rained, like freezing rain while I was there, and the streets were just pure slick of ice. I've never seen anything as bad since then.
I've had that too, but the point I'm getting, I guess, to go back to Dusty is Dusty was in this interesting place where I guess we have to consider that there was a stretch towards the end of WCW where like they brought back all of these guys who were legitimate legends, but it it was not fitting for the time, I guess.
No, and he had that
Like,
weird ECW run where he wrestled Steve Carino on pay-per-view, I think.
okay,
That was in like 2000. That was real bizarre.
yeah, I think he had a bull rope match with Carino. I think.
Yeah, did he ever do anything with ROH? I don't think he did. I know he did
I
stuff
don't.
with TNA.
I don't think so.
I don't know,
Other Brad will
but
chime in and if he remembers that or not.
but the thing that I think the thing where I think Dusty would really shine as his legacy is that Dusty was really really good about helping other people, like building them up and helping them flourish. I think if I remember correctly, just for example, Dusty was the mastermind behind the face Bailey gimmick because he was like, you are like you have a natural baby face thing going for you, and people want to like you. So let's do this thing and put these pieces together to have this happen. And oh hell, I know there's another gimmick that he was a mastermind of that I can't put my finger on, but it, it's the same thing with a lot of people. Is if you have it doing it for themselves, then it gets terrifically self-indulgent and they get real protective. But if you have them working on stuff for other people, then they're not inhibited by the paranoia of looking out for themselves or the selfishness of it. It's they're kind of unrestrained with helping you go, and so that I think is a huge deal for for Dusty's legacy is how many people he taught and helped.
Space too, so like it helped people to like kind of properly kind of disassociate things like when they were in the moment of like his booking decisions and things like that. And I think guys like Cornette have helped him like talking about working there and like a lot of the the stuff he helped them with. And like that's there's a couple of good ones from Cornette, like where he they're doing promos, and he said like you can get away with anything, and he made like some Challenger joke, and he said the lights go out, and Dusty's like, we don't make jokes about the Challenger, baby. And then like there is the one where Heyman and the original Midnights attacked him, and we've told the story before, but Cornette, it's like the first time he ever bladed, and he like did it once, nothing happened. Did it again, nothing happened. I think he did it a third time, and then he's just bleeding like a stuck pig, and Dusty's like, I said a little color.
You can get a little juice, Daddy. We're on TBS. You can't do that.
Yeah, that is actually
baby.
That's actually an interesting kind of invasion-y angle because Jim Ross, like, they don't even work here, and
yeah,
you can find it on YouTube pretty easy because Cornette does bleed like a stuck pig.
Yeah,
like Muda scale.
It's funny. Dusty impression is the. I'm citing a Letterkenny joke here, but a Dusty impression is the impression that all wrestling fans have, kind of like a Tony Danza impression. Everybody does a Tony.
Yeah.
Hey, everybody's got a Dusty Rhodes, baby.
Everyone has a Dusty Rhodes, a Jim Barnett, and a Macho Man.
That's because the Jim Barnett's just 2 words with the weird inflection.
My boy.
My boy. But
I love Brad. I love the Laps fan impersonation of Jim.
Yeah.
I quit. I can't do this. I quit.
It makes me so sad that he didn't do a book because he didn't want to out himself as gay. That makes me so sad. Because that would have been an amazing book. Because Cornette was talking about that, and he's like, Jim, like everyone knows, like just do the book.
All right. So,
do you have any
couple to wrap it up? Yeah. Well, okay. So one of them here, and this might, okay, I'll do the easy one first, and then I'll do the one that might get me some pushback. And it's not even so much salvaging his reputation as it is his post-wrestling stuff, honestly bigger than his wrestling stuff, is DDP. Because DDP went from being, world champion, unique story about late getting into it and building himself up and everything, and having, honestly, a fan-damtastic finisher and that sort, to his post-wrestling work has been truly massive in what it's done and how it's helped.
So, my pushback would be, I feel like he didn't salvage his legacy so much as he was well regarded, and he's building a case for sainthood.
Yeah, well, yes, and that's based on the premise, I guess, of it's not so much salvage.
Because like the shit he did with Jake and Scott, like that is legitimately like sainthood stuff, because he took them in and like he gave them structure.
Mm-hmm.
And really tried. And then, I mean, he had mixed results with Scott, but Jake, he made a. I mean, and
Scott was actually doing it until COVID, and he was just by himself, and then he didn't have a support structure to hand to help him fight back.
And I think Scott was better though. Like it was just mixed results, but I think like it was one of those things where he still had his issues, but it wasn't like what it was. I think.
Yeah.
But like Jake's a huge success story. Like he just helped Butterbean.
He's been helping Bags. And those are just wrestling names. Yeah.
Oh, did he help Scotty Riggs get a new eye?
No, he didn't help him get a new eye, but Scotty went from looking one way to looking really, I mean, Scotty's really in great shape now. Kind of Stevie Richards kind of had a career renaissance in doing, fitness stuff with DDPY.
And I had bought the DDP yoga, and it's legit.
Mm-hmm. My biggest problem is the one that I really wanted to do was the Red Hot Core, but I have a spot where I screwed up in my lower back, and it may not have been from, oddly enough, it may not have been from wrestling. It may have been where I fell down the stairs in my house. But I can't, whenever you get to that last point in the leg lifts, there's a spot just above my pelvis where those vertebrae just grind. And I'm like, oh, I can't do this, it's god-awful pain. Now that you brought up another one that I thought he went from being very well regarded to then being regarded as a drunken screw up to being well regarded again with Scott Hall.
And he helped his case a lot. Like going on Austin's podcast really helped him because you just saw like he was like a if you ever go back and like it's two guys just nerding out about wrestling because Scott Hall's like, okay, like who's got the best drop kick and stuff like that is just and like hearing him talk about like how like there are a few guys that have as much passion as Scott Hall did when he talked about wrestling.
He was really smart about it.
And I like the business side of it because he was talking about like the merch stuff. And that's part of the reason like they went to WCW is because Vince was like screwing them on. Because Scott Hall was saying like if they would have moved the decimal point over just one spot, like it would have been life changing for him and not even affected their bottom line.
Yeah, and they wouldn't do it. So the last one I had that might have been controversial is, I guess the question is, in the changing of the legacy, because this is kind of a special case or it may not be unique, but it is more rare. It's this guy went from being successful but regarded as kind of a shithead to coming back and kind of having a redemption run. Is the cutoff in '97 from when Shawn Michaels left, when he came back, and being regarded very differently, and his behavior and that sort of stuff changing.
He has, I don't know. I thought about putting him on my list, but like the stuff with like Dax was really shitty.
It does. It's not, and I'm not excusing that. I think that part of it is being around some of your old friends is going to bring out some old tendencies, which still shouldn't have happened. Like that, I can understand why he still shouldn't have done it, but the idea of where he was in '97,
I would say he's a better person. I'd say he still has his problems, but he does seem like he's genuinely a better person. And I did think like when the Vince thing came up in January, he handled that much better than Triple H, and he got way more heat in the situation than they did. And I don't know, NXT has its ups and downs, but I feel like he's generally like not a terrible mentor.
It's
like I'll use.
I think that their training methods are lacking, but I think that, like you said, he's a better person than he was. He's not. It's not perfect, but he's better than he was, and it seemed to me like he's trying to do a good job.
Yeah, I think he's just kind of a dick, but sometimes like he tries. Like I think he tries not to be, and he just can't help himself. What I was gonna say is he should have been on my list, but I'd forgotten a couple. He's kind of like William Regal with a little. With just but not quite as he's kind of like William Regal, like cleaned his act up, mentorship, but I think Regal generally has like a better, like, you don't hear bad stuff about Regal other than like
you hear less bad stuff
other than his terrible slander of Tajiri and how terrible he is.
Well, and the not confirmed, but circumstantial evidence sure is kind of damning contract stuff.
And
WWE.
I will say, like, him wanting to go back when Triple H was back, like, doesn't bother me. Like,
but that's not what I'm talking about.
No, but like, I'm strictly sticking to that because people come up with some dumbass conspiracy theories, and I don't.
I believe the conspiracy theories. Like
but I'm saying like I'm sticking strictly to his behavior with all that. I think he's always wanted to retire in the WWE, and he got screwed over by Vince, and he went to AEW because that was his option, and he did his job well while he was there, in his on-air stuff. And then when he had his opportunity to go back to where he really wanted to be, he did. And I mean, leaving the contract stuff out, I don't see a problem with that. Like,
I can accept all that and agree with that,
because I think
but
he was a lifer. I think he was legitimately a lifer. Thought he was going to retire doing the NXT thing, and then they heartlessly cut him. Like,
and his son Charlie Dempsey is in the system.
yeah,
Like, I think he wants to be there with his son, to whatever extent the son has success there. But I actually do believe the conspiracy theory that the actual legitimate contract tampering that was going on by the WWE with certain AEW contracted talent. I'm of the conspiracy theory that Regal was the one who was actually facilitating the contract tampering. Like, I fully believe that.
I thought it was Bobby.
Um,
I thought we figured Bobby Fish was a larger culprit that then got nothing. Because that's funny. People
if
are
he
like,
was, then he's like what a dumbass, because it's like he
he got
got nothing from that.
he was so washed too. He
Um,
even got like the boot from Impact after a couple of matches. But what I thought was
I hate
funny
to
about
I hate to
that
throw
was
age. I hate to throw age, but like Bobby Fish is like deep in his 40s. It's like,
Well, no, Bobby Fish says he's in his 40s, but that time whenever he fought Goliath and took him to a draw is one of those things. I'm making old person
go, and
jokes.
he's a dick though because like I don't like Punk, but the shit he was pulling with CM Punk was unprofessional, and like that like I wouldn't hire a guy that did shit like that.
Was that the
I,
like
That
still looking like he was going to kick out stuff?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
like that shit doesn't fly with me. Like I do your fucking job. If you don't like him, boo hoo. Like just get over it and do like you're getting paid for to do a certain thing, to do it right. Like that's my opinion on that. And like I said, I don't like Punk, but I try to be really fair about those situations. And Fish was an idiot. Oh, and I did have one more with the William Regal thing, but
Well, hang on. Matt
oh yeah,
had
right.
something he was in there.
No. Like, I believe the conspiracy theories about Regal. Like, I accept that if that's unfair, and I agree with I'm in agree with Brad. It's like I do think he was like a lifer. I do think he was hindered.
Because it was a fuck
But I
you to
also feel like
Triple H too. He was kind of like he was kind of a casualty of like that when they blamed Triple H for like NXT not beating AEW, and they kind of like released all the pretty much stockpiled the AEW roster and like released all those guys like associated with Triple H, and I feel like he was a casualty of putting Triple H in his place at the time.
yeah, but I mean, I kind of think there was something like shady going on,
There might have been.
but it's neither here nor there. Like, that's now like almost 2 years after the fact.
Yeah.
So,
And they got like no one out of that other than Andrade, who's been a non-factor.
well, that's the thing. Like, there are people who like, oh, so and so wants to go back. It's like, okay, then go. Like, let them go.
They keep saying, but see,
Like,
like some of it's dumb. They keep saying that like about the House of Black. They're still there, and Black, is still like put in a good match with Edge and really like did a lot of good work there. Like if they, but like see, the thing is that
they
people get real weird about that stuff, and it's like, you know, I don't care if someone wants to switch companies. Like I like Ricky Starks. I don't think he should, but that's only because I don't think they'll use him well because he's not their body type.
I think Ricky Stark specifically has like a ceiling, and he might think that the ceiling is higher than it actually probably is. But okay, but to go back to like guys who were the WWE system who has been rumored or in theory like will go back, like Malachi Black and Buddy Murphy. They're in a different. I almost feel like we'll let them go because it's like, what's actually going to happen? Like, Andrade came back, and it's like he came back, he was in the Royal Rumble, and now it's like
He's wrestled 2 matches since then.
5 months, and it's like well, I think more than that, but it's like it's been probably like half a dozen in 5 months. So it's like if Malachi and Buddy came back, like, what are they gonna do? Like, maybe they'll be featured, but it's also you're gonna run into the situation that people hate on AEW for, but it's also like you're gonna have so many guys on the roster in WWE, and they already have like a big roster, but you have so many guys on the roster. It's also like it's you can poke fun at them for not featuring Andrade more, but it's also like, what are you gonna do? Like, you only have so many. You have even like WWE has, even though it has more time, you only have so much time. You don't have like 50 hours a week to do wrestling content. Like, you don't. Like, they have a little more than AEW. AEW has 5 hours. If you want to actually go with WWE, not including like shows which might be on like streaming services or whatever, but between NXT, SmackDown, Raw, you have like 7 hours. Okay, that's 2 more hours, but it's also like, where are you going to fit like 100 guys?
Yeah, he's
So if
wrestled 6
Malachi,
times, not appeared since April.
yeah, if Malachi and Buddy were to go back, they have an incentive to go back because like their actual partners, marriage or otherwise, are there. So it's like, well, that actually is like an incentive.
Yeah,
Like, wouldn't you want to be like where your wife or girlfriend, fiance, whatever, like are there? Like, yeah, of course you'd want to. So you can understand that, but it's also like, well, even if they go back, like, what are you gonna do?
well,
This presumption that people have where it's like, oh, you can't let them go because like they'll be
I think there's
like,
like I think Black has potential, but I know there's a back and forth about his health. But Buddy Matthews, like I just don't know. He,
I think
I hate to
I
use
think
the
Buddy's a,
term vanilla midget, but that's what Buddy Matthews is. He's a vanilla midget.
he's a good worker, but he doesn't have much personality or promo ability beyond that, and he's
I
kind
would
of boring.
say, I would say, I would say he has. I would say he has the charisma of cardboard, but you can actually draw something on cardboard, so it's probably less than that. Like he has nothing. Like I'm
Look,
sorry, like I know the internet like jerks off to him sometimes, but they did the same with Drew Gulak, who has the same problem, no personality.
look, I think that I think Buddy is an exponentially better worker, in-ring worker than Dominic Mysterio. And we've kind of like been disparaging about Dominic Mysterio, I think with a good reason. Dominic Mysterio is has more charisma, is a more dynamic personality, and is more entertaining than Buddy
Mm-hmm.
Murphy.
Yep.
Like, and that's a guy that's like, I could talk like for an hour about how I feel like Dominic Mysterio
He's not
for
good,
the
but like
in
he
for
found a
the
niche.
in-ring work is terrible and should be elsewhere. But character-wise, Buddy Murphy's like here. Dominic is like way up here in terms of like everything else, like charisma, promo ability, like all those other intangibles. Like, so again, like if Buddy and Malachi were to go back, like that's
Buddy's got.
where are they going to be?
Yeah.
They're probably better. They're probably better off, and maybe Triple H would use them more than like Karrion Cross in his little
Just
faction.
carry across. I think Black. I think Black would be fine in either company. He can be an upper mid card guy. I think AEW though has given him more freedom to kind of do his thing, and
Lore.
I really think like the really good moments. They have one of my favorite AEW matches still, which is the pre-show with them versus it's Penta, Pac, and Eric Redbeard.
Oh yeah, that
Oh
was
yeah,
really
yeah.
good.
Yeah,
See,
The problem with House. Go ahead, Chad.
I was gonna say the thing about Matthews is I think he's really in the best spot for him right now, being the attack dog for a group, because then he can be with them and have a scowl on his face, and then do in ring stuff, and it works. Like I honestly think that right now the guy is in the best position for him, and probably the most successful position. If he's not having to carry it on his own, but he is also seen as an important part of a group. And that, great. I say go with that. The thing with House of Black, at least for me, is that I would hate to see Matthews or Malachi leave, because then you're going to be leaving Brody King in the lurch. And he is, I think he is the singularly most over member of the group.
I think you could break him off into his own deal, though, with Julie.
I'm not sure how well he's going to go singles right now.
I thought he did pretty good in the Continental Classic, though.
Yeah, I probably would disagree with you that it's like, I actually feel like that Brody and Julia would be better, like, by themselves. Like, I think Brody could break out, because I think the guy actually has a lot more charisma than perhaps he's like you would expect, because he doesn't necessarily get the chance to talk about that, but he actually has good charisma. He's a good worker, good size, good look, and I think Julia has actually like improved a ton.
Well, I mean, it's funny. It's
those
funny,
two as like an act,
like with Julie, because Julia, she had all the charisma when Pillman Jr. and Griff Garrison. But I have a controversial take there, though, is I think Griff Garrett, like, looking back and seeing some of their work since then, like, Griff Garrison was a better worker than Pillman Jr.
Yeah, it's true.
And I don't even think Griff's that good. I just think, like, he's a little better overall. Now, I do have a final name. Do you have any more, Shad?
No, those were the ones I was going to.
So it is one I think we'd all be in agreement with. And actually, I think he's a massive redemption arc. Massive. Tony Schiavone.
Ah, that's a great one.
The Tony Schiavone redemption makes me so happy.
He used to block you on social media if you mentioned wrestling to him.
I'm happy about this, and I've talked about this on the show like many months or years ago at this point, that the AEW Tony Schiavone redemption arc is to me very heartwarming, because again, I started watching wrestling in '92, and it was with WCW. So I thought about this, and I feel like that kind of plays to where I prefer AEW over WWE. And there's many reasons for that, because I predominantly I actually do feel it's like I like the style of AEW more than WWE. But beyond that, it's like I've always kind of preferred like the secondary promotion over like the WWE.
I've just never liked the way they handle wrestling. It's just never, even like when I've liked their product, it's never been like my product. Like the way WCW was, or even like something like New Japan is. Like, there's just something that doesn't connect with me.
Mm-hmm.
But the first stuff I watched was WCW, though, so I think that's why.
Probably plays a role, yeah.
And maybe that's the case. Like, maybe the fact that I saw that first, essentially, even though in that first like couple of years of like becoming a wrestling fan, I devoured everything. So I like watched an absolute ton of like 80s WWF. So I became like a Hulkamaniac. Like, I saw like the WrestleManias, the SummerSlams, Royal Rumble, Survivor Series, all that stuff. I consumed all of that over the course of like 2-3 years. But I've always like loved WCW, which obviously Tony was a part of, outside of like a year or two where he was in actually the WWF back in the day. But I love Tony. Like, I had appreciation for Tony. I felt Tony was maligned a lot back in the day for his actual commentary. I actually thought he was pretty decent, or good even, when he was with WCW.
It's largely from when WCW was going under and he didn't care anymore. And for him,
he definitely, there was a downgrade because like he was just kind of over it.
For the thing that Bischoff made him said about Foley winning the
Yeah.
Yeah. Not happy about doing.
Yeah, and some stuff like he and Heenan didn't get along very well. So, well, I don't know. I've watched Heenan shoots, and Heenan's like never like complimentary about him, but he never goes like all in on him.
He never disparages him, but it may have been that they worked together fine. They just
Heenan was slosh
so
the whole time he was in WCW, according to him.
if you actually listen to one of the first, or maybe the first show that they did together, which might have been like Starrcade '94 or around that time, I feel like they just didn't connect. Like they didn't quite understand each other. I always feel like Keenan kind of thought WCW was a little more like low rent and like he was above it. Not that he necessarily thought that, but it was also like I think he had like certain expectations
I think he wasn't having
for the way
fun.
things.
His problem.
Yeah, like how things were supposed to be handled or how it was supposed to be presented or whatever, and that wasn't the way. So I think he was thrown off by that, and I feel Shivani had his like guard up with that, and they never. I don't feel like they ever really connected.
It's kind of like I feel
It's
like the
very
same
unfortunate.
about JR and Ventura. Like they kind of always had that little. They were always felt like they were kind of a little off kilter page wise of the book.
A little bit, although if you had to actually ask me, I feel like the JR Ventura team, which I feel was a little more limited in terms of time. Like they weren't together long enough, but I actually felt like they were probably, if you had to actually, I would argue they were probably better than Tony and Brain. That said, I again to turn it back to Tony, like I do feel like AEW was his redemption arc. Like I feel has been good to great since he was with AEW last like 5 years, like 6 years. Like he's been, I thought, phenomenal.
And I think
And there are times you
podcasting
can tell
helped
how
a
it,
lot.
yeah. And
'Cause-
I do feel like you can tell how impassioned he is about
and
AEW. Like he actually cares.
he has a sense of humor, and I think that like he has good insights. He's not like one of those guys that like has nothing to say. Like he always has stuff to say about it. Again, old footage showing up, and you can watch him like when he was younger, and I think that you can watch a lot of it. So instead of like the WWE propaganda pieces that might show him in a bad light, you can see him like week to week and um, enjoy him there. He's another one they signed him they didn't want to use because he was too southern or something, I think, when they signed him in like 89.
He was actually not that bad.
No,
and
you know what's funny is he works really well with Ventura, and you can tell Ventura like loves him.
Mm-hmm. When it was when Tony and Ventura actually did some shows in early '90s, WCW was actually pretty good.
Yeah,
I've talked before, like I actually love Heenan the better, and Ventura is like probably number two. Like Ventura was actually phenomenal.
I have a love hate with Ventura because there's been, even when we did the Dangerous Alliance, there were some times he just pissed me right the fuck off. Like there was, and I'm not gonna dog on him too much. That one where he was just obsessed with like downplaying Brian Pillman because he was small. And then there's that one he kept trying to like when they did that international tournament and he was trying to go like racial stereotypes with like the Japanese team and like Jim Ross was just like, can we not please?
Yeah.
Remember he kept saying something about Rice and Jim Ross was like, I don't want to talk about this right now.
I'm just glad that we got Tony Schiavone back, and because I liked Schiavone. I thought Schiavone, like on Nitro, I thought Schiavone was a good play-by-play guy who was able to do it without overpowering what it was. He was able to provide that straightforward, direct play-by-play complement to what was going on. And then you had the other people. You had Heenan and you had Tenay and Zbyszko adding the color onto it. So I thought Tony was really good at his job. It just so happens that a lot of times people don't appreciate the person that plays the straight man.
And they don't
And so,
understand. You see it in radio a lot, or even even something like this. They don't understand like the idea of dynamics and things that you have to do, like how, and to the show to a lesser extent, but sometimes how you have to pull the
mhm.
and like how you have to like sometimes like you'll be in the middle of a conversation, but like you're watching the clock or you know how long we've been talking, and you'll hear each of us do it sometimes where we kind of then just kind of pull the conversation on to the next thing just because we know we have to move on even though we could stay on the topic. Like, so people don't like necessarily understand kind of, I would, have either of you read Discworld?
Oh yeah.
I always,
I'm aware of it. I haven't read it
okay,
yet.
so you're always doing, in Shadow know this joke, so I call it camel math. So if you read Discworld, the smartest thing in the world are camels. And like, so if you hear like, if they do a thing where they're doing math, it's a camel, and they're doing like advanced like physics in their head. But it's hilarious because all the camels' names are like, the main one that had like time in a book was you bastard, and then there was another one like you stupid son of a bitch. Like that was the kind of names they had. But yeah, so I always call it camel math because that's what the I think it's from Pyramids.
You could either have the camels being the smartest, or the time that they locked Detritus the troll. He got accidentally locked in the in that freezer warehouse because the cooler it got, the better he could think, and he's like working like quantum equations on the side until he got too cold and,
Yeah.
and froze up and passed out.
And one of my favorite lines too is the wizards are gonna do something, and the librarian. So there's a librarian in the Wizard Academy, Matt, and like in the second book, he got turned into an orangutan, and they decided he liked being an orangutan, so he stayed. But he said something, and the wizard told him he didn't know anything about guerrilla warfare, and I just thought that was hilarious.
The librarian's a great character. My favorite characters are the Watch.
Yeah.
But there's the great Sam Vines theory on money and boots, where he didn't have enough money to buy good boots, so he had to buy the boots he could afford, but they would wear out faster. So he ended up paying more for cheap boots because that's what he could afford at the time, as opposed to being able to pay a bit more for really good boots that would last longer. And it's about the quandary he was stuck in, because he wanted to have better boots because he knew it would be more cost effective, but he never could get the money together to get them.
I always confuse people because I call popcorn banged grain. But they're really good books, but it's also one of those things that like the whole book can be silly as hell, and then the last like 20 pages it just makes you cry completely.
Yeah. That's at the end of the Hogfather. I love the conversation between Susan and Death at the end of the Hogfather is just excellent.
I'll tell you what got me was the end of Small Gods.
I haven't read that one yet.
So, do you care if I spoil it? Essentially, so
care.
he's kind of like the main character kind of becomes a religious figure, and he dies at the end, and so he's going into the afterlife, and the antagonist is there, like paralyzed with like indecision and fear at the end of the desert. And he goes up to him. This guy's like, "But that guy tortured you his whole life." He's like, "Yeah, but he's just being himself, and I'm me." And then, like the end of the book, is he takes him by the hand, and they like walk off together at the end, which is like really was touching. Oh, and Gaspode. Gaspode is like the saddest one to me too. So they had a talking dog, Matt, in one of the books, in whatever the I think Moving Pictures, and so he got the ability to talk, but so he would try to.
I think that'll put a cap on us for this episode, unless we had any parting thoughts.
No, I don't think we've decided what next week is yet, have we?
I don't think we decided yet, so
yeah, it'll probably be footage next week.
We shall see. So, everybody, thank you for being here with us for this episode. We appreciate you watching it live, listening to it podcast, whatever. We're just glad you're here with us. So, this is Shad with Matt and Brad. We've been in 3 Corners. You're in the 4th. We'll see you next time.